Hello everyone, I'm the storyteller, and today I'll take you on a spooky story. But don't worry, it will be a gentle and relaxing journey before you drift off to sleep. If you're looking for a tale that's just mysterious enough and gentle enough to relax to, then you've come to the right place. Now, find yourself a comfortable space, close your eyes, and let the story begin. Story 1. The Ghost in the Backseat. Excerpt from the audio recording of witness testimony from Daniel M., an Uber driver in Spokane, Washington. I started driving Uber at night after losing my job at the auto repair shop. At first, it was just to make some extra money. But for some reason, I became more accustomed to the quiet dullness of the empty streets after midnight. No honking, no traffic, just the faint yellow lights shining down on the cold pavement and the sound of the tires gently rolling over the smooth asphalt. I would often play soft jazz in the car, instrumental music, just to fill the silence. Spokane at night felt like a town that had been forgotten. Houses with their lights off early, and people rarely out on the streets after 11 p.m. unless they had an urgent need. But it was that silence that made me start noticing the unusual things. I don't remember exactly when the first strange ride happened, but I can tell you one thing for sure. It always started around 1:13 a.m. That night, on February 14th, yes, Valentine's Day. I remember because I had no one to go out with, so I figured I'd try to catch a few rides to earn some extra cash. It was 1:07 a.m. and I was parked outside an abandoned gas station in northern Spokane, waiting for a new ride when I got a notification. Pick up a passenger at North Monroe Street, a quiet stretch of road near an old neighborhood that had been vacant for years. I accepted the ride and turned the car around. It took about 5 minutes to get there. When I arrived, no one was waiting. I turned on the high beams, glanced in the rearview mirror, and checked the time. 1:13 a.m. They must be inside, I thought, but the app said, wait outside. I was about to call them when the back seat clicked, like someone had just sat down. I turned quickly, but the seat was empty. No one was there. No footsteps. No sound of the car door opening. I thought maybe it was the car tilting because of the slope of the road or the back tire being unbalanced. But the strange part was, in the rearview mirror, I could see the seat cushion indented as though someone was sitting there. I turned on the overhead light. The seat was still empty, but the indentation remained. I reached back and pressed on it. The cushion felt normal. I reassured myself. I must be tired. But then the dashcam screen suddenly flickered, like something had moved in front of it. And I swear, on that screen, there was a faint pale face pressed against the back seat behind me. No eyes, just two deep black voids. I spun around. Nothing, but the back of my neck was ice cold, like something had just slid past my skin. I canceled the ride, revved the engine, and drove off without looking back. From that night on, things started to happen. At first, it was a soft breathing sound, almost like wind slipping through a crack in the window. But it was clearly coming from the back, even though the car was empty. Then came the smell of dampness, like something had been buried for years. I had the car cleaned, sprayed it down, even replaced the seat covers. But the smell always returned, especially after 1 a.m. I started getting complaints from passengers. One elderly Hispanic woman sat down and immediately asked, "Who's sitting in the back seat? It feels like someone's watching me." A student from Providence Hospital stood outside the car, pointing to the seat behind me. That seat has someone in it. I'm not sitting there. I switched mirrors, replaced the dash cam, even removed the back seat to check for any technical issues. But every time the dash cam recorded at night, that spot would be blurry, like something was obstructing the lens. I once tried to tell this story to an older driver named Frank, who had been driving Uber for over 10 years. He just stayed quiet for a long time, then said, "North Monroe Street, huh? You shouldn't take rides there." A few years ago, a young girl jumped out of a car while it was moving because she said someone in the back was whispering in her ear. The car lost control, hit a light pole. She died on the spot. Frank took a sip of his cold coffee, then continued. They never found the passenger in that ride, but the camera captured an image of someone sitting in the back, even though she was the only one who booked the ride. I had considered quitting, really, but the last time I truly got scared was when I picked up a little girl, about 9 years old, at 1:10 a.m. Unusual, because kids shouldn't be out that late. She was standing alone, wearing a white dress, her long hair covering her face. The app showed her name as Melanie, and the drop-off location was Silver Pine Cemetery. Silver Pine Cemetery. I hesitated but still unlocked the car. The girl got in without saying a word. I asked a few questions, but she didn't respond, just stared down at the floor. About 5 minutes into the ride, I looked through the rear-view mirror and saw someone else sitting next to the girl. A woman with messy long hair, her face distorted, blurry as if it had been melted by acid. I slammed on the brakes. When I turned around, the car was empty. No little girl, no woman. But the back door was open, and on the floor, there were muddy, child-sized shoe prints. I'm not telling this story to scare anyone, but I swear, ever since that ride at North Monroe Street at 1:13 a.m., the left back seat of my car is no longer empty. And if you're a passenger, if you happen to get into my car and decide to sit in that spot, just remember one thing. If someone whispers in your ear, saying, "There's someone already sitting here," please believe them. I had been sitting motionless behind the wheel for over 20 minutes, right in the middle of the road leading into Silver Pine Cemetery. The car engine was off, the door wide open, and the cold night wind howled through the window cracks. The floor of the car still bore the imprint of tiny mud stains in the shape of a child's foot. I didn't know why I hadn't run away. Maybe because I wasn't sure anymore what was real and what was not. I had sworn I would never return. But the truth was, I couldn't pull myself away. The next morning, it rained lightly in Spokane. A persistent drizzle that seemed like a never-ending sob. I sat in my shabby apartment on the 3rd floor, my eyes glued to the laptop screen. I searched Google, Facebook, Reddit, and even obscure forums dedicated to sharing supernatural stories. I typed in the keywords, little girl, white dress, Spokane, Silver Pine Cemetery. Nothing much came up, but then I tried a simpler search. Melanie, Silver Pine Cemetery. The first result made my throat tighten. An old article, published in a local paper in 1997. The headline read, "Mysterious Disappearance of Young Girl. Search for Melanie Brooks, 9 years old." The article had a photo. A young girl with long hair, wearing a white dress, a sad and slightly blurred face. Exactly the same face I had seen in the car. Melanie went missing in February, on Valentine's night, while playing in the backyard. It was around 7 p.m. The police and search dogs scoured the forest behind her house, but they found nothing except a small shoe covered in mud near the wooden gate that led to the forest trail. Her mother's name was Nancy Brooks. The article didn't say much about her, only quoting a small part. I heard her whispering to someone in her bedroom. She kept saying, "I won't go with him. I'm scared." But later, she dismissed it as just the imagination of a child. Melanie never returned. I went to Silver Pine Cemetery the next morning. The sky was still overcast and rain drizzled through the dry, dead trees. The cemetery sat on a small hill covered in moss and fog. I found the caretaker, a man named Carl, who had worked there for over 40 years. I asked him about Melanie Brooks. Carl was silent for a long while, then slowly spoke. "You're the third person to ask me about this in the past 20 years. The two before you, a reporter and a medium, both disappeared after poking around here." He pointed towards the corner of Section B, next to the old rusted iron fence. "That broken headstone, that's Melanie's." I followed where he pointed, and just as he said, in the corner of the cemetery, there was a white marble headstone, broken in half and covered in moss. The name on the stone was nearly erased, but it was faintly readable. Om M. Brooks, 1988-1997. Right under the headstone, something made me shiver. A small stuffed doll. Black hair, white dress, soaked in rainwater. One of its eyes had fallen out. I bent down and saw that the doll's dress had been embroidered with the name in red thread, Melanie. As I stood up, the wind picked up, and for a moment, I heard small footsteps behind me. Soft, like someone walking barefoot on wet grass. I turned around. No one, but the trees behind the fence were swaying, not because of the wind. It was as if something had quickly passed by, enough to knock the branches. I started backing toward the car. When I opened the car door and sat down, the interior light unexpectedly turned on, even though I hadn't touched it. The back seat was sunken, this time deeper than usual. Without turning to look, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. That evening, I went to Nancy Brooks' house, the mother of Melanie. The information from the article led me to an old address, and surprisingly, it was only about 6 miles from Silver Pine Cemetery. The small blue house, paint peeling and patchy, looked like no one had lived there for a long time. I knocked on the door. No answer, but as I turned to leave, the door opened by itself, revealing a dark, empty space. I hesitated for a few seconds, then stepped inside, calling out, "Mrs. Nancy, I'm here to ask about Melanie." The house was cold and dark. The wooden floor creaked under my feet. The tattered curtains hung down like cobwebs. I walked through the living room, covered in dust. Then into the small bedroom, old, but still with a picture of little Melanie hanging on the wall. Underneath, there was a child's desk, and on it, a pencil drawing of a car. And a little girl sitting next to a woman with no face. I heard knocking on the bedroom door behind me. 3 knocks, slowly. I turned around. The door was still open, no one there. But when I bent down to look under the door, there was a small hand creeping in, pale, cold, and the fingernails. Pitch black. I ran out of that house without looking back. Now, every night, I drive around Spokane, not because I want to, but because I feel myself being pulled onto the road. The back seat always has someone in it, and every time the clock strikes 1:13 a.m., I get an unnamed addressless ride request, just labeled, "Pick up at North Monroe." I no longer dare to cancel, because if I don't answer, the dash cam will turn on by itself. And every time I see that face, no eyes, no mouth, but staring straight at me. I've tried to leave Spokane many times, but every time, as soon as I drive a few miles out of the city, my phone restarts on its own. The Uber app opens and a ride request pops up, with a pickup point at North Monroe. I've thrown my phone out the window. I've locked the app, deleted the app, even smashed the dash cam. Useless. The calls still come. Sometimes, I don't even need the phone. The whisper echoes in my mind. 1:13. The back seat's still empty. No one believes me, and I don't speak of it anymore. I'm just left with myself. And honestly, I'm not even sure if I'm still me anymore. I met her for the first time on a Friday night. Spokane was cold as ice, snow covering the streets, and the fog was so thick the headlights could barely cut through it. I was on my way home when the ride request pinged. 1:13 a.m. Pick up, North Monroe, that spot again. This time, I didn't try to avoid it. I drove there, not thinking. Maybe a part of me had gotten too used to this by now. Or maybe I was starting to be drawn into something bigger. When I arrived, she was standing there, a woman tall and thin, wearing a long gray coat. Her long hair hung down, nearly covering her entire face. But I noticed one thing right away. She had no face, not the covered face kind or wearing a mask kind. She had no face at all, where eyes, nose, and mouth should be. There was smooth, featureless skin, like an uncarved wax mask. I don't know why I still opened the door for her. She sat in the left back seat, the seat that had already had someone in it. But this time there was no resistance, no soft breathing, no musty smell. Just silence, horrifying silence. I asked, "Where would you like to go?" No answer, but the navigation screen on my phone automatically entered a destination. Pine Hill Asylum. Abandoned. Pine Hill Asylum was a name I hadn't heard of, until I looked it up later. It had been a mental asylum, closed in 1985 after a mass death of patients under mysterious circumstances. Located nearly 30 miles west of Spokane, nestled between dense forest and abandoned land. On the way, no one spoke. No music, no breathing. Just the sound of the tires grinding against melting snow. I glanced at the rear-view mirror. She had turned her face toward me. No movement, no expression, but I could feel the presence of those faceless eyes staring at me. And then I saw another face, right beside hers. Melanie's face, the girl I used to drive. She was sitting there, her head bowed, holding a doll with one missing eye. But her lips were moving. I could read her words. "She's not a passenger. She's the one who holds the seat." When we arrived at Pine Hill Asylum, the snow was falling heavily. The rusted iron gate tilted awkwardly, and beyond it stood a dark, 3-story building, its windows shattered, walls peeling. She opened the door and stepped out of the car. Not a word. But before closing the door, she left something behind on the seat, an old, faded silver photograph. In the photo were 3 people, an older man in a doctor's coat, a young woman in a patient's gown, and Melanie. I flipped the photo over. There was a scribbled message. "Room 204, the keeper of memories. Don't let her leave." I knew I shouldn't have gone into Pine Hill, but I couldn't resist. Part of me needed to know. Who was the keeper of memories? And why was Melanie involved with this place? The first floor was empty. Only the wind howled through the cracks in the door frames. The second floor was pitch black, thick with dust. But room 204 still had a nameplate. Faint but readable. M. Brooks, female ward. I opened the door. Inside was an old metal bed, the mattress moldy, and a large mirror covered with a white cloth. I walked over and pulled the cloth off. The mirror reflected the room, but it didn't reflect me. Instead, it reflected a woman sitting huddled on the bed. She turned her head to look at me, and I saw. Her face was completely blank. At that moment, I heard quick small footsteps. I turned. No one. But on the floor, there were muddy children's footprints, leading outside. I ran after them, down the stairs, through the hall, out the back door of the asylum. The wind cut through my skin like a razor, but I kept running, and then I saw the hole, a freshly dug grave. On top was an old wooden sign with a scrawled message, "Backseat, always someone there." I don't know how long I collapsed there. When I woke up, I was in the driver's seat, the car moving, and the app on my phone displayed a new destination. Old Morgue, Central Morgue, Spokane, and the back seat was still sunken in, just like before. I tell this story hoping someone will hear it, hoping someone can help me get out of that seat, the seat that already has someone in it, and that someone will never leave. I used to think the scariest thing was a face without eyes, or the whispers in my ear in the middle of the night. But no, what truly terrifies me is memory, not my memory, but someone else's. Disjointed fragments, lost and disconnected, came flooding into my mind like a torrential downpour, ever since the night I left Pine Hill Asylum. I couldn't remember how I got home. All I knew was that when I woke up, I was sitting on the couch, my legs covered in dirt, clutching a torn old photograph from that night's ride. A photo of Melanie, the faceless woman, and a man in a white lab coat. I had never seen this man before. But the more I looked, the clearer the image became in my mind. It was as if I had once been a part of their story. His name was Dr. Ronald Thorne, the head physician of Pine Hill before the asylum was closed. A genius obsessed with memory erasure therapy. It's said he believed that all mental trauma could be cleaned by erasing the victim's memories. Melanie was one of his final test cases. I traced his name through old files, most of which were erased or sealed. But I found an old address that used to be his home, about 40 minutes south of Spokane, in the middle of a deserted wooded area. I went there in the late afternoon, the pale sun casting light across the trees. But the deeper I went, the colder the air became. Not the chill of the weather, but a cold that crept down my spine. His wooden house was still there, though it was decaying and partly collapsed. The door was unlocked, as if waiting for someone to return. Inside, the house was almost empty. Just a few scattered items. A tattered armchair, some old medical journals, and a wooden door at the end of the hallway, sealed with rusted chains and a warning sign. "Do not open. Memory storage floor." I didn't understand why it was named that. But in my mind, a voice whispered, soft as a breath, "The door only opens when the keeper of the chair allows." I found a rusty key inside a hardcover book under the desk. It fit perfectly into the lock. But before I could turn it, the whole house seemed to shake, and my flashlight flickered off. In the darkness, I saw a figure of a child, Melanie, standing a few steps away, holding a soaked doll. Her lips moved. "Don't open it. Mommy is sleeping." I stepped back. But then someone's hand touched my shoulder. I spun around. It was the faceless woman. She stood close to me. No breath, no blink. Just the cold emptiness of her face pressed against mine. And then I saw memories that weren't mine. A chaotic, fragmented film. Melanie being dragged down the hallway of Pine Hill, crying uncontrollably. A sealed room, leather chairs, machinery, and the cold white light. Dr. Thorne standing there, smiling gently. "We're just cleansing your mind, dear." The faceless woman, who still had a face then, trying to burst into the room, screaming, "Give my daughter back. She's not sick." But the steel door slammed shut, and no one ever came out. I collapsed onto the wooden floor, gasping for air. When I opened my eyes, I saw that the chain door was now open. Inside was a room filled with white light, no dust, no cobwebs. In the center of the room was a car seat, the exact same seat from my car, placed right in the middle, and on it was the corpse of a woman, not decayed, no smell, but pale skin, mouth slightly open, and a complete face. The face I'd seen in the photo, Melanie's mother. I approached, and as my hand touched the seat, her eyes opened. I woke up in the car. My back was soaked in sweat, my heart racing. The back seat still had someone there, but this time I felt warmth. And when I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw a woman's face, complete but slowly melting away. She whispered, "My memories are now yours." The phone vibrated. A new ride request. No address, no passenger name. Only a message. "Return what has been taken. The seat is waiting." I don't remember where I drove, but when I stopped, I found myself in front of a new cemetery. Not Silver Pine, but Woodland Ridge, where Pine Hill used to bury patients without relatives. In Section A, there was a newly placed headstone. It read, "Claire Brooks, 1960-1997, the keeper of memories. Melanie's mother." I knelt down, not crying, not trembling. Just a feeling, like a piece of me had fallen back into place. But the story doesn't end here, because that night, when I tried to head home, my car wouldn't start. The control screen lit up, and on it, a message appeared. "Last ride. Return the memories to where they belong. North Monroe, 1:13 a.m. Chapter 5. The Last Driver and the Never-Ending Journey. Excerpt from Daniel M.'s personal diary, found in an abandoned car at the vacant lot behind North Monroe Street, Spokane, WA. The car still wouldn't start. I tried 3 times, twisting the key until my fingers were sore. But all I heard was the cold click-click, as if there was nothing alive left in the engine. I wasn't scared. I wasn't panicking. I thought maybe I had gone too far to turn back. The screen on the dashboard remained lit. It didn't fade, didn't blink. There was just one line, quiet and persistent. "Last ride, return the memories to where they belong." I didn't need to ask where that was, because when the clock hit 1:13 a.m., I heard the back door of the car open and close. I don't know who sat in the back seat. I didn't dare look. I just knew my hand automatically turned the key again. And this time, the car started as if it had never had an issue. No GPS, no address. But I knew the way. Every turn, every little hill, every winding street leading to the edge of Spokane, where there used to be a small wooden house in the forest. Now just a pile of ruins. But where I stopped wasn't that house. It was a dead-end road behind it. where a buried stone well once held the failed cases. Pine Hill didn't want to make public. I stopped the car, turned off the engine. But this time, the person in the back seat didn't disappear. I heard breathing, not the light breathing of Melanie, but the heavy, labored, broken breathing, like lungs filled with mud. I turned slowly, and I saw him, Dr. Ronald Thorne. His face was no longer human. One cheek caved in, his left eye leaking fluid, mouth twisted in a crooked smile. But I recognized him, the man who had pushed Melanie into the memory erasure chair, the one who locked her mother in the storage room on the second floor. He opened his mouth, his voice dry and raspy. "I've never left this seat. You've seen their memories. Now it's your turn." And then he dissolved into ash, but the back seat still sang. I stepped out of the car, flashlight in hand, and walked toward the old well, where the grass had grown over most of it. The closer I got, the heavier the air became, as though every step I took was crushing a part of hidden history. In the weeds was a rotting wooden well cover with a strange symbol drawn on it. A circle with a single chair inside, crossed out. I didn't understand the meaning, but my hand still lifted the cover. Below the well was a thick darkness, no bottom, no echo. I couldn't see the bottom, but I heard voices, whispers, moans, pleas, and laughter. The laughter of children, the wails of women, the chanting, like a mantra from men, all blending together, as if beneath it all was where every denied memory had gathered. I don't remember why I threw the car keys down the well. Maybe it was the last unconscious act to sever everything. Maybe I believed that if the chair was returned to where it began, everything would end. But I was wrong. When I turned back to the car, the back seat was no longer sunken, but on the seat cushion, an imprint of a body remained, as though someone had melted into it and left their mark forever. And beside it, on the floor of the car, was an old black notebook. I don't remember ever seeing it before, but on the cover, it read, Log 61, Driver's Record. Inside was a list of names, all drivers. Each name had a start date and a date of disappearance. None of them made it past the 40th day since their first ride at 1:13 a.m. I counted. My name was at the end of the list, Daniel M. Shaw. Start date 2:14, date of disappearance, not yet recorded. I took the notebook to the police station. I sat there, telling them everything, one by one. The young officer initially thought I was joking, but when I showed him the notebook, he stopped. His hand trembled as he flipped through the pages, because in that list, he saw his father's name, Martin Y., taxi driver, disappeared in 2002. No one found the car, no body, only a back seat with an imprint. The officer let me go, but I knew I was no longer an ordinary citizen. I had become a part of the loop. A few weeks later, I sold the car. The buyer was a student learning to drive, named Henry. He just asked, "Why are you selling it so cheap?" I just smiled and replied, "The back seat doesn't suit me." He laughed, not understanding. That night he called me, his voice frantic. "Hey, I saw in the rearview mirror. There's someone sitting in the back, but I'm alone." I hung up, and then I disappeared. Final note from the police. Daniel M.'s car was found 3 weeks later at the vacant lot behind North Monroe. No body, no signs of struggle. The back seat still had the imprint. The dashcam was burned out. Only the last footage was recovered. 1:13 a.m. The man looks back, staring into the mirror. Behind him, a face without eyes, smiling. Story 2. Clara's Night Shift. The Call of the White Phantoms. My name is Clara Hensley, and I work the night shift as a nurse in the geriatric ward at Whitmore Hospital, an old facility nestled deep in a small mountain town in Montana. Ever since I moved here 6 months ago, I've never grown accustomed to the eerie silence that drapes the hospital's long, narrow hallways at night. No bells, no labored breathing from patients, just the ticking of the clock and the flickering fluorescent lights above, dimming and brightening as if controlled by unseen hands. That night, I was assigned to work alone on the 3rd floor, a special unit reserved for elderly patients who can no longer care for themselves. Normally, there are 2 nurses on duty, but Laura, my shift partner, left early because her daughter had a fever. I didn't complain. I figured it would be another peaceful night, filled with a few yawns and some idle phone scrolling in the nurse's station. Around 2 a.m., I heard faint beeping coming from room 307. I frowned. That room was supposed to be empty. It had been cleared out the week before, after Mr. Healy passed away from heart failure. Yet the sound of the heart monitor was unmistakable, clear, steady. I grabbed my clipboard and hurried toward it. The light above the room's door was on. I pushed the door open, bracing myself for a technical glitch. But instead, I saw an elderly woman lying on the bed, eyes closed, breathing weakly through an oxygen mask. The heart monitor was fully connected, lights flashing red and green. A white patient ID bracelet hung loosely on her shriveled wrist. But the information on it was blurred, as if someone had scratched it off. I approached slowly and checked her vitals. Her heart rate was steady, her breathing even. Her hand was ice cold, but there was still a pulse. I looked around the room. No charts, no records, not a single note documenting this patient's presence on my shift. "What's your name?" I asked softly, but she didn't open her eyes. Back at the nurse's station, I searched the system. Room 307 had no patient listed, no data, no transfer, no admission. I returned, deciding to stay in room 307 for observation. Around 3:12 a.m., the woman opened her eyes. They were pure white, no pupils, but her lips moved, whispering something. I leaned in to listen. Her voice was faint, dry like ashes. "7th nurse, she's dead. Don't let it happen again." I jerked upright. "What did you say? Who is the 7th nurse?" No response. She closed her eyes again, as if drifting to sleep. I pulled out my phone and started recording everything. Whether hallucination or not, I needed proof. For nearly an hour, she said nothing more. I dozed off briefly beside the bed. When I woke, dawn had broken, and the bed was empty. No monitor, no IV lines, no oxygen mask. Everything was gone, as if it had never existed. The sheets were neatly tucked, still smelling of bleach. I rushed to the nurse's station, called the shift supervisor, and asked about the woman from the night before. They looked at me like I was losing my mind. "Clara, room 307's been empty all week. Were you sleepwalking?" I handed them my phone. They hit play. A long silence. Then her whisper crept through the stillness, sending chills down all 3 of our spines. "7th nurse. She's dead." The supervisor's face went pale. He walked out without a word. An older nurse, Marlene, approached and gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "Clara, do you know about the 7th nurse?" I shook my head. Marlene swallowed hard. 10 years ago, in that same room 307, there was a night shift nurse named Janet. She was caring for a patient with no records, just like you. She recorded the voice too. And then, a few weeks later, Janet disappeared from the hospital. From the entire town, no one ever found her. A shiver ran down my spine. Her files disappeared too. As if she never existed. I left the control room at the end of my morning shift that day in a daze, as if some invisible hand was pulling me out of reality. Everything seemed normal to everyone else. The soft tapping of shoes on the vinyl floor, the drip of coffee in the machine, the nurses laughing and chatting, but to me, it all felt staged. That whisper still echoed in my head, clear and haunting enough that I couldn't bring myself to listen to the recording again. But I knew I wasn't insane. I knew she had been there. The next night, I was on the night shift again. This time, I wasn't alone. Laura was back. When I told her the whole story about the old woman, room 307, the recording, Laura pursed her lips and gripped her thermos tightly. Are you sure you weren't hallucinating? I once went 3 days without sleep and started seeing people walking on the ceiling. No, you don't get it. That old woman, she knew the name of Nurse 7. How could she have known? Laura fell silent. She didn't dismiss it, didn't laugh. She only said one thing. In that case, you need to check the security footage. We decided to go down to the security office on the ground floor. It took some serious convincing to get the old guard, Gordon, to agree to pull up the footage from the night before. Laura and I held our breath, eyes fixed on the screen. 1:57 a.m. Nothing. Two. I appeared, pushing the door open to the geriatric wing hallway. 203. I opened the door to room 307. Gordon frowned. That room's empty. Keep watching. 2-5. The hallway camera suddenly fuzzed then. The screen shook for a few seconds. A white blur, long and misty, slithered along the wall, gliding right behind me as I stepped into the room. I shivered. Laura turned to me, her voice hoarse. Clara, you didn't see that figure? I shook my head. Zoom in, I told Gordon. Gordon zoomed in. The white blur came into sharper focus, like a patient's gown floating midair. No head, no feet, but something like hair, matted into a bun at the nape, and long, limp arms dangling forward. I couldn't breathe. Gordon abruptly turned off the screen. That's enough. You two shouldn't get involved in this. You know something, don't you? I almost screamed. Gordon didn't answer. He pulled a yellowed old photo from his drawer and placed it on the table, sliding it toward me. This is Janet, Nurse 7. That photo is the last remaining image of her in the system. Everything else, every record, just vanished. I picked up the photo, my heart pounding. Janet stood beside a hospital bed, her face visibly tired, but her eyes were staring at something just beyond the camera. She was also assigned to a patient without a record in room 307. The difference is, no one believed her. Later, she locked herself in the nurse's office one night and Gordon swallowed hard. When they broke the door down, all they found was a white blouse hanging on a hook. No body, no blood, no trace. The next night I returned to work. Laura called in sick, claiming her kid was ill, but I knew she was just scared. Around 2:20 a.m. I heard the beeping again. But this time, it wasn't from room 307. It was from 312. I ran there. The door was ajar. Inside, no one. But the monitor was active. The screen displayed a heart rate, 7 beats per minute. An impossible number. Barely alive. And then, the monitor went black. A red message appeared. 7th shift, farewell. I staggered back, horrified. As I turned to leave, that voice echoed again from inside the room. Clara, nurse 7 wasn't the last. I whipped around. No one. Rushing back to the nurse's station, I pulled out my phone and played the recording again. This time, the voice had changed. It wasn't just the old woman anymore. There were children's voices. A man's voice, giggles echoing like they were rising from the bottom of a well. They intertwined. Room 307 does not belong to the living. We need more nurses. Stay with us, Clara. I left the hospital the next morning with trembling hands, but I knew this wasn't the end. I had to find out who, or what, was haunting room 307. And more importantly, why it was me. I took 2 days off after the incident in room 312. But even without setting foot in the hospital, I couldn't sleep. In my head echoed the meaningless heartbeat. 7 beats per minute. The laughter of intertwined souls. The invisible eyes watching me everywhere I went, even when I was hiding in my tiny apartment. On the second night, as I sat alone in front of the bathroom mirror, I saw something wrong. My reflection moved half a second slower. I raised my hand to touch my hair. In the mirror, my double did the same. But later, her eyes were empty. Then, instead of stopping like I did, she continued tucking her hair behind her ear and whispered, "You're on the list now." I screamed and smashed the mirror. Shards of glass scattered. And for a brief second before they hit the ground, I saw my reflection smile. The next morning, I called Marlene, the only older nurse brave enough to speak about Janet and room 307. She reluctantly agreed to meet at a small cafe on the edge of town. The air was thick when I entered, and Marlene was already waiting in a secluded corner, her hands trembling as she held a cup of hot tea. I shouldn't be telling you this, Clara, but you need to know. She pulled an old file wrapped in newspaper and string from her bag. The pages were yellowed, the ink smudged, but it was clearly a medical record. On the front, a red stamp read, "Restricted for Board of Directors only." "I stole this from the basement archives years ago," Marlene whispered. "It's about patient number 7, the first one admitted to room 307 back in 1964. I flipped through the pages. No name, no photo, just a code, M07. The record stated condition, unresponsive to sedatives, no clear heartbeat yet aware of surroundings, behaves as if alive but identity unverified. Warning, do not allow nurses to be on shift more than 7 nights consecutively. I froze. The next page was a handwritten testimony from a nurse named Frances, the last one assigned to patient M07 before she disappeared. The final line was scribbled in a panic, as if written during a breakdown. "She's learning to mimic, learning to replace. If I vanish, burn room 307. That evening, I returned to the hospital. Not for work, but for answers. I snuck into the basement using Laura's old key card, borrowed while she was distracted on a call. The archive was cold and dusty. Rows of metal drawers stood like upright coffins. I located drawer 307. Inside was an old hospital blueprint from the 1960s. Room 307 was originally the morgue. My chest tightened. I dug deeper and found a stack of black and white photos. One of them was a group picture of nurses taken in 1972. But as I looked closer, there were 8 nurses in the photo. The caption below listed only 7 names. The nurse in the center with curly hair and a blurred face had no name. And her face was identical to the old woman I once cared for in room 307. Footsteps echoed behind me. I spun around. A nurse stood at the end of the hallway, wearing an outdated white uniform, holding a clipboard, her face obscured in the dim light. She didn't move. "Excuse me. Do you work here?" I asked, voice shaking. No response. I stepped back, hand brushing against a flashlight. When I aimed the beam at her, her body dissolved into smoke, fading into the wall like she'd never been there. I rushed to the night shift manager's office, ready to call the police. But when I opened the computer, there was an unread email in my inbox. No sender, no subject. I clicked. Only one sentence. Current number of nurses 6, almost 7 now. That night, I didn't go home. I wandered the town like someone lost. But no matter where I went, I saw her, the unnamed nurse, gliding past pharmacy windows, reflected in the blank screen at the gas station, or standing silently in a crowd at the bus stop, unnoticed by anyone else. Clara Hensley, the 6th nurse. I began to understand. Those who spent 7 nights with the spirit in room 307 were no longer ordinary people. They were chosen, marked, and now I was being watched by entities that don't exist in any file. I don't remember how I fell asleep in the temporary room I'd rented at the edge of town. The last time I looked at the clock, it was almost 4 a.m. The darkness in the room was so thick, it felt like there was no moonlight, no world outside. I just lay there, awake yet dreaming. And then, I began to hear footsteps. Not from the hallway, not from the floor above, but inside my head. Slow, heavy, like someone dragging their feet across damp concrete, steadily approaching me. Then a voice rose up, whispering from within. "You are no longer Clara." I jolted awake, my back drenched in sweat. But as I sat up, I saw my reflection in the wall mirror was looking in another direction. Only for a second, but I was certain. It was facing the window, while I was turned toward the bed. I stood and walked up to the mirror. The reflection had returned to normal, but on the surface of the glass, there was a faint trace, like a child's handprint, scrolling a series of numbers. 077-1964. I spent the entire morning searching the hospital records for that date. Fortunately, I still had internal system access from my personal computer. 7/7/1964. The day patient M07 was marked as deceased, but right below that entry, a handwritten note. Body not found in the morgue, bed empty, attending staff missing, and along with that, a name, Clarice Hensley. I froze. That's my last name. I had never known anyone in my family who worked at that hospital. But I dug through my mother's old papers and found a faded photograph. A woman in a white nurse's uniform, standing beside a hospital bed. The note on the back, Clarice, Whitmore Hospital, 1963. I went straight to my mother's house, searching the old attic where she kept her keepsake boxes. I dug through piles of papers, diaries, family photos, and finally, I found a small, worn leather journal, untitled. I opened it and saw trembling handwriting. They said she was dead, but I still see her every night, in the mirror, in my sleep. She mimics my posture, my voice, my smile. One day, she won't need me anymore. In the corner of the page, smaller, messier handwriting read, "If my daughter ever reads this, leave Whitmore before it makes you replace me." I didn't know whether to cry or tremble, but from that moment, I understood. I wasn't the first in my family to be caught in this loop. And maybe I was born to take someone else's place. That night, I went back to the hospital, not for work, but to return to room 307. This time, I brought 2 small infrared cameras, a Bible, and a hammer. I wasn't planning to retreat again. Room 307 was still locked, but I had gotten the key from the main office. I opened the door, and instantly, an icy chill washed over me. The air inside was so suffocating, I had to take deep breaths just to stay conscious. The smell of antiseptic mixed with rusty metal and something else, like burnt hair. I set up the cameras in 2 opposite corners. One pointed at the hospital bed, the other at the door. Then I sat down in the old metal chair beside the bed. "I know you're here," I said, my voice shaking. "But this time I'm not afraid." No response, but the ceiling lights began to flicker. The door slowly closed behind me. Click. The camera began to hiss with static, as if something was interfering. And then she appeared, not through the door, from the ceiling. A pale figure, long hair hanging down, crawling spider-like from the ceiling to the foot of the bed, wheezing as she moved. I couldn't stand. My hand gripped the hammer, but I couldn't lift it. "Clara, you're no longer her." The voice echoed through the room, not from her, but from me. My mouth moved on its own. I couldn't control it. "I am Clarice. I've returned. I can't leave. Unless someone takes my place." With all my strength, I raised the hammer and struck the camera. The lens shattered. The lights went out. In the dark, I heard screaming, but I couldn't tell if it was hers or mine. I woke up in the nurse's station. The shift supervisor stood nearby, eyeing me with suspicion. "You fainted in the hallway. A patient found you unconscious just outside room 307. I tried to sit up. "No, I went inside." He shook his head. "That room was locked. The cameras didn't record anything." I let out a dry laugh. Cameras don't capture them. That night, I reviewed the remaining camera footage. Only one clip survived. There I was, sitting alone. Then behind me, Clarice appeared, not as a ghost, but as me. A different version. Face cold, emotionless, eyes black as voids. And as I in the video turned to face the camera, she smiled. 6 nurses had gone missing. I was the 7th. And if I didn't escape in time, then Clara Hensley would become the next name that never appears in any record. Story 3. Delivery for the Dead. I work for a small delivery company in the outskirts of Oregon, where most orders are local, just around town and nearby neighborhoods. But about 2 months ago, I was assigned a peculiar route. One single package every week, always headed to a small house nestled deep within the pine forest. Nearly 7 miles from the nearest highway. They call it the Old Briar House, a name still registered in the system since 1963, back when it belonged to a family of loggers. But now the place is abandoned, plaster peeling from the walls, moss covering the porch roof, and a rusted chimney that looks like it hasn't been used in decades. I couldn't understand how anyone could live out there. Yet every time I brought the package, someone would come to the door. An old woman, frail, with skin pale like ash and long white hair cascading to her shoulders. She never said a word, just opened the door a crack, reached out to take the package, and shut the door without a sound. At first I thought she might be mute or just a reclusive elder, but then I started to notice things. She never turned on any lights. The house had no electricity, no sound of a radio, no TV. I never heard a single noise coming from inside. Even on freezing nights when temperatures dropped below 0, There was never smoke from the chimney. How could she survive out there? No heat, no power, not a single trace of modern life. By the 4th week, I decided to ask my manager about the order. I just wanted to be sure I wasn't getting tricked or caught in some weird prank. The house at Old Briar? Marcus, my manager, raised an eyebrow when I mentioned the address. Yeah, we've been getting a weekly order from the email Mary Willow 997. Recipient listed as Mary Willow. Marcus paused and typed something into the system. After a few seconds, he looked up with a strange expression. That email doesn't exist anymore. The system disconnected it in 2006. Wait, Mary Willow? I nodded. He kept typing, then stopped. Mary Willow died in 1997. Died in that very house. The story goes she lived alone until her death and died in the living room. Her body decomposed so badly. Neighbors called the police because of the stench. I said nothing. The veins in my neck felt like they tightened. I thought that was just a rumor, I said, hoping I was wrong. No, Marcus replied. There's a full forensic report. Since then, the house has been abandoned. No one's bought it. No one lives there. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the thin, trembling hand that received the package from me each week. That grayish skin, the strange, musty smell seeping from behind the door crack. I thought it was rotting wood. Now, I'm not so sure. I decided to bring a flashlight on the next trip. It was raining. The forest was pitch black, truck wheels slipping on the muddy trail. I arrived at the house around 11:38 p.m. The house was completely dark, as always. I stepped out of the truck, package in one hand, flashlight in the other. But this time, I didn't ring the bell. I circled around to the back, where there was a small kitchen window. When I shone the light inside, I saw something that made my heart nearly leap out of my chest. A photo hung on the wall. A woman, the same old woman, was standing beside an open casket. Inside it was also her. I stumbled back, slipped, nearly fell. That photo couldn't be real. A person can't attend their own funeral. I turned to leave when I heard the front door creak open. No light spilled out, but I heard footsteps, slow, dragging, steady. Then a voice whispering, raspy, like wind moaning through dead trees. This time, could you come closer? I can't see well. I dropped the package on the steps and bolted, but my truck's wheels were stuck in the mud. I slammed the gas, turned the wheel, headlights sweeping the woods, where I saw a figure standing still beneath the pine trees, head tilted as if watching. The next day, I told Marcus I couldn't deliver there anymore. He scoffed. Doesn't matter. The order was just rejected by the system. That email was permanently disabled. Reason listed as activity from an unidentified source in a dead zone. What? I repeated. Dead zone. A place where no digital signal can reach. Like a black hole. What's weird is, the order was placed from inside that house. That house doesn't have internet, right? Right. No phone. Nothing. So, how did an email get sent from there? I left the office in heavy silence. That night, I received a package. Overnight delivery. No sender name. My address. Accurate. I opened it. Inside was a photo. Me, standing at the door of the Old Briar house holding a package. Eyes looking directly at the slightly open door, and behind me, in the darkness, a hand reaching out from the wall, touching my shoulder. I didn't call the police. I wish I had. But the moment I saw that photo, me, standing in front of that haunted house. And the hand reaching out from somewhere to touch my shoulder. I couldn't think of anything else but locking my doors, turning off all the lights, crawling into the darkest corner of my bedroom, and sitting there until dawn. My heart was pounding so fast, it felt like each beat was a knock against a coffin lid. I'd heard of cruel pranks before, photoshopped images, fake hauntings to scare people. But no, this wasn't like that. This wasn't something friends would do as a joke. That was my face in the picture. Empty, like my soul had been drained. And that hand, it wasn't human. Long nails, blackened like charred wood, wrinkled bluish-purple skin. I could never forget the bone-deep cold that sank into my skin when I saw it. 2 days later, I decided to return to Old Briar House. Not because I was brave, but because a disturbing thought had taken root in my mind. If I didn't face this, it would never stop. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life cowering in the dark, jumping at every creak, or dreading the next email, wondering if it would be another picture. I rented a Jeep with 4-wheel drive, brought an ultra-bright flashlight, a chest-mounted GoPro, and an old folding knife my father once gave me. When I arrived, the house was unchanged, silent, decaying, wrapped in a fog thick as smoke. I circled around back to the window I had looked through before. This time, the glass was shattered from the inside. Shards still littered the sill. A pungent stench rose, rotting meat, mold, and death. I held my breath and aimed my flashlight inside. There, in the middle of the living room floor, was a wooden box. Old, dusty, untouched. I looked around. No signs of anyone. No footsteps. No breathing. I climbed through the window, my foot creaking on the wood floor. The box felt like it had been waiting for me. I knelt down and opened the lid. Inside were seemingly harmless items. An ivory comb, a decaying bottle of perfume, a worn leather notebook, but what nearly made me fall back was a photograph. The old woman, but not in her usual quiet form. She was smiling, seated beside a young girl whose face looked uncannily like mine. Long black hair, wide, terrified eyes. Her hands were tied with cloth. Her neck streaked with dried blood and scrawled across her forehead in jagged black charcoal. Replacement. My throat went dry. Then, from somewhere, I heard a whisper, not from the house, from the box. I leaned closer, and this time I was certain. It was a lullaby, muffled, broken, as if coming from another world. Hush now, child. Don't you cry. The forest calls. The dead pass by. I slammed the lid shut and stumbled back. Just then the front door flung open. There was no way the wind had done that. No way. And at the threshold, she stood there, Mary Willow. But this time, she didn't just reach out like before. She stood fully revealed in my flashlight's beam, face pale as bone, jaw skewed like it had been broken, eyes sunken deep, and her skin, scarred, blistered, burned. I raised the knife in front of me, backing toward the window. She didn't move forward. She just stood there. But her mouth began to move. Not in English. Not in anything human. It was a strange guttural chant, like a soul-summoning ritual. My flashlight flickered out. The GoPro hissed with static. And then I saw them. In the dark, at least 4 figures stood behind her. No faces. Only hollow sockets, all of them facing me. I ran. I dove through the window, tumbled into the mulch and dead leaves, scratched and bruised, but alive. I didn't look back. I just knew. If I did, I might be the one who gets replaced. The next day, I brought the leather notebook from the wooden box to the town library. The elderly librarian Hazel glanced at it and immediately frowned. "Where did you find this?" I found it in Mary Willow's house." She didn't ask more. Just flipped through a few pages, then stopped at a passage. "When blood of shared lineage spills onto forest ground, the soul that was burned shall choose one to replace." I read the line over and over. "Mary had a daughter," Hazel whispered, "but she vanished in 1976. No body was ever found. Just rumors that she was sacrificed in some ritual to keep Mary alive longer." I swallowed hard. And if her soul still isn't at peace, then she's still looking for a replacement. That night, I received a call from an unknown number. Just one sentence, whispered through garbled static. "One final delivery, or someone else will be chosen." I looked around the room. The windows were shut tight, but I could hear footsteps. On the roof, I sat frozen in the dark, only inches away from the phone. The screen had gone black long ago, but the strange whisper from that anonymous call still echoed in my head like a deadly incantation. One last delivery. If not, someone else will be chosen. I wasn't superstitious, but something. What I saw, heard, and touched went far beyond what logic could explain. My mind knew clearly. Going back to that house meant walking into death. But if I didn't go back, would someone else be forced to take my place? Who would be the next chosen one? Ellie, the new delivery girl, just accepted for a trial shift next week. Mrs. Hazel, the woman who helped me decipher that cursed journal? Or worse, Marcus, the one who approved the order, completely unaware of the death shrouding that house for nearly 3 decades. I couldn't let that happen. I returned to Old Briar House on a moonlit night, not because I wanted the light, but because my gut told me the darkness would kill me before Mary ever got the chance. This time, I didn't bring a package. I brought salt, white candles, and a small jar of human ashes. Something Mrs. Hazel gave me after hearing my story about soul substitution. If she ever performed a soul transfer ritual using blood sheen, she said, then only fire and cremated remains can break that loop. But you must burn what's tied to the curse before she chooses again. I asked, tied to it? How? She pointed at the notebook I had once found inside the wooden box. I climbed onto the roof of Old Briar House at around 11:45 p.m. Why the roof? Because the footsteps I heard the night before hadn't echoed from below. They came from above me. They moved slowly and heavily, as if someone were crawling with their hands across the shingles. I remembered a story I once heard, that a wandering soul's final refuge was the rooftop, where it watches everything, waiting for the right moment to come down and take a life. And if Mary hadn't found peace, if the curse still lingered, then she would be up there. The wind on the rooftop was sharp as blades. I strung the salt line tightly around the chimney, placed the notebook on a rotting wooden plank, then circled the notebook with ash. I lit the candles and then I heard laughter, not mine, not anyone I knew. A cracking, high-pitched laugh like a child's, but brittle and broken, as if coming from the dried throat of the long dead. Then the darkness pulled back. No, not because the moon was hidden. It was as if the light itself was being pushed away. As if a massive, shapeless, colorless entity had hovered above, eclipsing the sky. I looked up. and saw a face imprinted against the stars. Charred skin, white, lifeless eyes, black blood oozing from the corners of her mouth. Mary's face. But she was as large as the entire rooftop, as if her spirit had expanded beyond the limits of flesh, as if time, space, and reality had all been warped by her hatred. I screamed. I set the notebook on fire. The flames rose unnaturally fast, as if the pages were soaked in oil. The ashes flew upward, then fell like bloody rain. Mary's face crumpled, as if being sucked back into the void. She screamed, not with her mouth, but through a deep, earth-shaking howl from beneath the ground. The roof trembled. Wood creaked and snapped. I nearly slipped over the edge, gripping the chimney to keep from falling. But once the fire died, everything fell silent. I thought it was over, until I saw a small shadow standing at the edge of the woods, about 30 meters from the house. It didn't move. It didn't blink. I shone my flashlight. A little girl with long hair, wearing a white dress. She looked exactly like the girl from the photograph inside the wooden box. The one who'd once been tied up. But now, there were no ropes, no blood. She stared at me. Her lips moved. Thank you for burning the book. But she's not gone. She has chosen again. I asked her, chosen who? She didn't answer. I came home the next morning, thinking the nightmare had passed. But on my dining table was a new delivery box. I didn't order it. No one else lived here. I opened the box. Inside was an old cell phone from the 1990s, and its screen blinked, even without a battery. New delivery route updated. Address, West Pine Cemetery, Plot 43. And in that moment, I knew the curse hadn't ended. It had only changed form. Because it's not just the living who send packages to the dead. Sometimes, the dead send packages to the living. I sat frozen on the kitchen chair, eyes fixed on the old phone, flickering with a sickly greenish-blue light. The words on the screen remained, as if time itself had stopped just to trap me in that moment. New delivery route has been updated. Address, West Pine Cemetery, Lot 43. I had never heard of this cemetery before, but the name West Pine made my heart clench. Pine, like pinewood, the forest surrounding Old Briar House, which meant this wasn't over. It had only shifted from the woods to the graveyard. The bigger question was, who or what was updating my delivery route? I tried turning off the phone. Useless. Even without a battery, the screen stayed lit. I smashed it with a hammer. But seconds later, the original package was back on the table, untouched, as if I'd never laid a finger on it. 3 days passed. Each night brought the same nightmare. I was standing in the cemetery, in front of a nameless grave. My hands gripped the package. Behind me, footsteps. Slow, dragging, like someone pulling chains. I turned around, but never in time to see anything. Only a chill brushing my neck, and a hand plunging through my chest from behind. I'd wake up soaked in sweat, still clutching the paper with Lot 43's address. I decided to go to the city library to find any information on West Pine Cemetery. It took nearly an hour to dig up an old dusty record with cracked leather binding. Hazel, the old librarian, had retired just last week. A new employee named Jonah helped me search the archives. When I mentioned Lot 43, he frowned. That lot's not on the official layout. What do you mean? Officially, West Pine only has 42 lots. Lot 43, that's just a nickname locals use because someone once dug an extra grave behind the older rows. near the patch of sunken ground, close to the forest's edge. Who dug it? Jonah went quiet for a long time. Then he pulled out an old photocopy. Lot 43, no gravestone. Buried individual, unidentified. Note, female, approx. 17-20 years old. Discovered in 1976. Body partially burned. I felt the blood drain from my face. The burned girl. The image from the wooden box. The one Mary once called her daughter. So the next receiver wasn't Mary. It was her daughter. I drove to West Pine Cemetery that weekend. It was drizzling. The raindrops tapped against the windshield like the erratic rhythm of my heartbeat. I parked outside the rusted iron gate and stepped in with the package in hand. For the first time in my life, I felt the thing I was carrying wasn't meant for the living. The cemetery map ended at Lot 42. I had to circle around the older section, where the grass rose to my knees and many tombstones were crooked or cracked. Finally, I found it. An empty patch of land. No grave, no marker. Just a shallow dip in the ground, as if someone had once dug and hastily covered it back up. I placed the package down, but before I could turn away, the earth beneath my feet trembled. I stepped back instinctively. The package began to stir. Something inside it was moving. I hadn't yet decided whether to open it when it opened on its own. The lid popped up effortlessly. A pale mist drifted out, freezing cold, choking my breath. And then I saw the girl, not with my eyes, but with memories that weren't mine. I felt myself pulled into someone else's past. A girl tied inside a wooden cabin, flames licking her body. Her mother's voice whispering through madness. Your blood is what keeps me alive, a part of you, so I can endure. Screams, fire, then darkness. I collapsed to the ground, just seizing like I was being strangled by a dead person's breath. When I opened my eyes, the sky had turned to a dull gray. I thought I'd been unconscious for only a few minutes, but my phone said 4 hours had passed. I looked down at the grave. The package was gone. In its place, a handwritten letter, scrawled in dark brown ink, shaky as if written in blood. I have received, but she hasn't let go. If you want to end it, go to where she first died, at exactly 2:16 a.m. If you're late, she'll choose someone else again. I knew exactly what where she first died meant. The living room of Oldbriar House. The room where Mary Willow had died alone, reeking of rot and shrouded in a darkness no one could see through. It was now 10:47 p.m. I had less than 4 hours to return there, but this time I wouldn't be going alone. I departed at 11 p.m. The rain was pouring heavily. Droplets slammed into the windshield like frantic drumbeats, urging me to drive faster, as though the entire world was counting down with me. I wasn't returning to Oldbriar House alone. In the passenger seat was Jonah, the young librarian from the city library. I didn't know what made him believe me. Perhaps it was the panic in my eyes when I left the library, or maybe just instinct. Jonah said quietly, I've dreamt of that house. Many times. Every time, I woke up exactly at 2:16 a.m. I shuddered. That number had first appeared in the message from the cemetery. Now it was invading another person's dreams. We arrived at the edge of pine forest just before 1 a.m. The path leading to Oldbriar House was now hidden beneath layers of decaying leaves, but I knew the way by heart. I needed no map, no guiding light. The house seemed to call out to me from deep within the rotting roots and dry branches that creaked in the wind. 1:38 a.m. We stood before the porch. The roof still sagged, its rotten wood festering as though time itself had tried to devour it, but failed. I opened the door. It groaned, a strangled noise like the final gasp of a dying man. The living room was exactly as I'd last seen it, except for one thing. The old photograph of Mrs. Mary was gone from the wall. In its place hung a black mirror, framed with charred wood, murky like stagnant pond water. Our flashlight beams didn't reflect, just darkness, dense, shifting darkness. Jonah whispered, "She is watching from the other side." I took out the urn of human ashes and a white candle. Jonah formed a circle of salt around the mirror's base. When the clock on my phone struck 2:16, the candle ignited on its own. No wind, no flame. Then she appeared. Not from the mirror. From the ceiling, the shadow descended like a dark curtain, twisting and lengthening into a human form. She was no longer the frail Mrs. Mary from my first delivery. This was something else entirely. A skeletal entity, hair dragging along the floor, skin mottled as though drained of blood and charred. Her mouth opened, releasing a broken whisper. "I am not finished." Jonah trembled violently, instinctively raising the cross he'd brought. But she was unafraid. She lunged directly toward me. Quickly, I pulled out the cemetery photo of the young girl and held it up. The darkness halted, recoiling, drawn toward the image. She screamed, not a whisper this time, but an eardrum-shattering shriek. "She is not your mother. I have devoured her soul." I understood now. The girl wasn't her daughter. She was a victim, an innocent soul bound and burned alive to sustain a curse of immortality. Mrs. Mary had consumed other souls to survive. I turned to Jonah. Now's the time to break the loop. I poured the ashes over the mirror. Each grain hissed and smoked, sizzling like human flesh on fire. The mirror cracked down the middle, light bursting forth, blinding as lightning. I shouted loudly, "Give back what doesn't belong to you." At that exact moment, every candle in the house extinguished. In the darkness came a sudden pop, like breaking glass. Then soft crying, small, fragile. A girl's voice. Jonah shined his flashlight. The mirror lay shattered into dozens of shards. In the middle of the room, curled up, was the girl from the cemetery. Her eyes were tightly closed, but her breathing was steady. She was alive. We took her out of the house before sunrise. As the first rays of dawn cut through the pines, we glanced back. Old Bry House smoldered silently. No fire, no smoke, but every brick, every window frame fell away, crumbling as if time itself had reclaimed it. It seemed the curse alone had kept it standing. Now, it was gone. A few weeks later, I received a strange email without a sender's address. The subject line read, "Final delivery completed. No recipient remains." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I knew it was finally over. Yet sometimes. At around 2:16 a.m., I still awaken. No nightmares, no footsteps, just a package sitting on the table. No label, no name, only a handwritten note. "If one day the loop begins again, please deliver this to the last person." Story 4. I died in 1992. I've never been one to believe in the afterlife. I never thought a soul could travel, or that memories could belong to anyone but the person who lived them. That was before I moved to Elkwood. Elkwood is a small town, tucked between ancient pine trees in northern Vermont. Its population barely reaches 2,000, and most people who grow up here rarely leave for more than a few days in their lives. My house sat near the fork on Route 9, right next to the old woods. A small wooden cabin with a rusted tin roof and creaky floorboards that groaned under every step I took. Mom said I needed a quiet place to start over. "You're not the same person anymore, Evan," she told me, resting her hand on my shoulder, eyes filled with worry. "Everything's going to be okay." But she was wrong. Dead wrong. 3 weeks after moving in, I started dreaming. Dreams so vivid, they felt like memories, someone else's life unfolding through my eyes. In the dreams, I was running through a smoke-filled hallway, wind howling through shattered windows. Screams echoed behind me, followed by a blinding red flash that devoured everything. I woke up with my heart pounding, my hands drenched in sweat. The strange thing was, the room I woke up in wasn't mine. It was a dorm room, beige walls, photos taped to the mirror. A girl with curly red hair. I didn't know who she was, but I was certain I had loved her deeply. Then everything vanished. I was back in my creaky old room, staring at the broken wall clock that had stopped ticking the week before, surrounded by the faint scent of decaying wood. At first, I thought I was suffering from some kind of post-traumatic delusion. The doctor had once told me I had a small hemorrhage in my brain after I fell down the stairs last year, but this memory, it didn't feel like a fantasy. It felt real, from the acrid smell of smoke, the sound of shattering glass, to the searing pain on my wrist as I tried to force open a scorched door. And what terrified me the most was the faint crescent-shaped scar on my left wrist. I never had that before. One afternoon, while walking past the town's abandoned library, I stopped in my tracks, as if something had grabbed me. The 3-story building had been closed for years, dust caking the windows, but in my mind's eye, it was burning, not metaphorically, burning in reverse, like a film reel winding backward. Thick black smoke, flames crawling up each floor, and a voice screaming, "Emily's still in there." Emily. I didn't know who Emily was, but my chest tightened. Her name hurt. Not a physical pain, something deeper. The ache of loss. I went to the town archives. An old woman named Agnes, who looked like she'd lived through the Civil War, ran the place. I asked her about the library fire. She frowned, then gave a small chuckle, like I was joking. "You're mistaken, dear. The library never burned down. It just closed in 1992, due to lack of funding." "That can't be," I whispered. "I saw it. I've lived here all my life, son. Trust me." But I couldn't trust her, because that night I dreamed again. Not just dreamed. I smelled smoke in my room. I woke at 3:08 a.m. and noticed one corner of my room was stained with soot. A photo of my mom hanging on the wall had turned a charred shade of brown. There was no explanation for it. I brought the photo to the local police station. The night officer, a man named Malcolm, looked at me like I was crazy. "Could be a candle or faulty wiring," he said. "I don't use candles," I replied. "There's no string lights either." He stared at me a little longer, then asked, "What did you say your name was again?" "Evan. Evan Cross." He frowned. "Huh. That name sounds familiar." I could tell he was on the verge of remembering something, but then he shook his head. "Never mind. Probably just a coincidence." A week later, I found the name Emily again. This time in an old hospital record someone had left behind the church. A copy of a death certificate, Emily Grace Moore. Cause of death, smoke inhalation. Date, March 11th, 1992. Location, Elkwood Library. I stood there frozen. The fire had happened. So why did no one remember? Why was the record dumped out back where no one would look? In that same stack of documents, I found an old photograph of a group of college students in front of the library. I nearly dropped the paper when I saw myself, or at least someone who looked exactly like me, standing beside Emily, the name beneath the photo, Daniel Moore. I no longer knew who I was. That night, I locked my doors and left every light on. But when I looked in the bathroom mirror, I saw a new burn mark just below my jaw. Red, stinging, and real. I had never been burned. Then, the images exploded behind my eyes like camera flashes. Me standing in the fire. Emily, panicked, searching for an exit. Me screaming, "Run, now!" But Emily didn't make it, and I never walked out. So who am I? Evan Cross? The newcomer to this town? Or Daniel Moore? The one who died in that fire in 1992? Or something else entirely? A soul caught between two realities, reliving a life that doesn't belong to him? I don't know, but I'm afraid. Because last night, in my dream, Emily was standing right outside my bedroom window. And for the first time, she looked at me and smiled. I didn't sleep that night. The way Emily smiled from the window, quietly, as if she knew I was living in a body that wasn't truly mine, left a deep fracture in my mind. I wasn't sure if I was awake or dreaming, but one thing I was certain of, a part of the memories inside me weren't mine. And some fragment of the past was trying to rise, like it was buried beneath the skin I wore. The next morning, I went to the post office to collect the mail. Amidst the usual ads and monthly bills, one thing made me freeze. A yellowed envelope with frayed corners, no return address. The handwriting was shaky. To Daniel M. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of old paper, browned as if stained with smoke. A single sentence, written in trembling but deliberate black ink. She never escaped, and neither will you. I couldn't breathe. I collapsed onto the post office steps, hands trembling. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell anyone. I was afraid that if I said the words out loud, reality itself would collapse with them. But I also knew I couldn't keep pretending nothing was happening. That night I went back to the library. Not in a dream, for real. I slipped behind the rusted fence out back, creeping like a thief. The rear door had long been locked, but someone, or something, had pried the hinges clean off. Inside, it was pitch black, thick with dust, and there was a smell. Something painfully familiar. Burnt paper, charred wood, the smell of the night I died. I turned on my flashlight, sweeping it across collapsed bookshelves and smoke-stained walls. On the second floor, where I dreamed of the glowing red hallway, I found it, a long trail of soot across the floor, leading from the main corridor to a shut door. I reached for the doorknob. It was ice cold. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Daniel? I spun around like I'd been shocked. No one was there. But the voice, that voice, was Emily's. I was sure of it. I ran, didn't dare look back. When I got home, I locked every door, pulled every curtain, and sat in the dark, gasping for air. But then, my phone rang. No number, no area code. I answered. Daniel. Emily. I froze. She only whispered one word. But the way she said my name, dragging out the last syllable like it was slipping through thick, heavy air, sent chills down my spine. I'm Evan, I shouted. Silence. Then came a faint laugh, not joyful, broken. You remember, it's time. The call ended. The next morning, I went to see Malcolm at the police station. I told him about the fire, about Emily, about the letter, about the voice that called my name at night. I needed someone to believe me. But as soon as I finished, he just sat there, staring, eyes wide, like he'd seen a ghost. Sweet Lord. What is it? I asked. I was a firefighter. In 1992, he said slowly. I was there when the library burned down, but all the records were scrubbed. No one wanted to talk about it. Why? Because of what happened after. 1 week after the fire, the survivors, 3 of them, including the boyfriend of a girl named Emily, they all died. I swallowed hard. Died? Dead. One hanged himself in his room. One stabbed himself with scissors. The last one vanished. All they found was a blood smear on the wall. Looked like the letter E. Malcolm stared directly at me. Are you sure your name is Evan? I nodded, but deep inside, something whispered the opposite. I was Daniel. I was part of that place, and I had never left the fire. That night I couldn't sleep. At 2:43 a.m., I heard knocking. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. I didn't open the door. I just stood behind it, heart pounding like a war drum. And this time, I saw her. Through the sliver of glass in the door. A girl with soaked red hair, standing still on the porch. She didn't move, but her eyes were locked on mine. It was Emily. I knew, because those eyes had haunted my dreams, even though I had never met her in real life. I turned on the porch light. She vanished. All that remained was a small puddle where she had stood. And one sentence, traced in wet fingers across the door's glass. You promised not to leave me behind. The next day, I went to Elkwood Cemetery. I walked to the back rows, known as the Forgotten Corner, and I saw it. Daniel Moore's grave, born 1972, died 1992. Right beside it, a cracked headstone, Emily Grace Moore. I knelt down. Emily? I whispered. I didn't remember. I didn't mean to forget. A cold wind swept through. Dead leaves scattered around me, and then I heard it, soft but unmistakable. You have to come back. That night in the mirror, I no longer saw Evan. I saw myself, but a different version. Brown hair, younger face, eyes red from smoke. Daniel Moore. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I only felt guilt. Emily died because of me. And now, she was waiting for me to come back. But how? And where to? I don't know what made me return to the library that night. Maybe it was the 2-hour dream I couldn't wake from, or the voice calling my name. Daniel, echoing in my head like metal scraping across concrete. Whatever it was, it dragged me out of bed at exactly 2:16 a.m. Exactly 2:16, like a signal, a time slot, an invitation back into the fire. I brought a flashlight, a recorder, and a notebook. Malcolm told me to write everything down. If you start losing your memory like the others, at least you'll have something to read back. He said it half-jokingly, but I saw real worry in his eyes. It was lightly raining when I arrived. Raindrops clung to the glass like 1,000 eyes staring in from the other side. I entered through the back door, following the scorched trail I had seen before. Still there, now longer, darker, as if it were alive, as if it was growing. Day by day, at the end of the burn, The door that had been sealed shut before now stood ajar. A gust of cold air hit my face. I stepped inside. The room was pitch black. The floor creaked beneath my feet. And then, in the middle of the room, I saw it. A door made of ebony wood, standing upright, not attached to any wall, no frame, no hinges. Just a door, placed as if someone had ripped it from somewhere else and set it down in the middle of forgotten time. Its brass handle was engraved with a single year, 1992. I knew I shouldn't touch it. I knew what waited behind it. But when I laid my hand on the handle, my skin stung, like an electric shock. And still, I opened it. No light, no wind, just one step forward into another world. I was no longer in the Elkwood Library. I was standing in a burning hallway, the exact one from my dream. The ceiling smoked, the wooden floor radiated heat, and the sound of screaming echoed from the far end. A fire alarm shrieked endlessly, slicing into my brain. And then I saw Emily. She stood at the turn in the corridor, eyes wide, hair in disarray, her face so full of fear it squeezed the breath from my lungs. She didn't see me. She looked through me. She was reliving the moment, and I was nothing more than a shadow caught between two memories. I shouted, "Emily, this way!" She didn't hear me. A beam crashed down, cutting off her path. I lunged forward to lift it, but my hand passed right through, like I wasn't real. I couldn't change a thing. I was only witnessing her death. I pulled out the recorder, hands trembling. "A memory that doesn't belong to me," I whispered. "But the emotions are real. I'm here. I see her. I remember everything." Emily turned, and for the first time, her eyes locked onto mine. She saw me. "Daniel?" she asked. I nodded. Hope flickered in her gaze. And then, everything exploded. Fire consumed the corridor. Emily's figure faded, dissolving into ash right before my eyes. I jolted awake, coughing, back in the moldy wooden room in Elkwood. My body trembled. My eyes blurred with tears. There was the scent of smoke, real smoke, still in the air. On the floor, the recorder was still running, and it had captured a single word in Emily's voice. Back door. I told Malcolm the next morning. He sat in silence for a long time, then quietly pulled an old key from his drawer. "There's another back door," he said, "in the library basement. It was sealed years ago, for safety reasons, but I think that's where it started." I didn't ask questions. We left at dawn. The library basement was like nothing I had ever seen. No lights, just a long corridor of crumbling stone, with damp earth stinging our nostrils. We passed 3 empty rooms before reaching a heavy iron door, sealed with layers of rusted metal. Malcolm used a blowtorch to cut through. When the door groaned open, I saw a sealed chamber, and at its center, a massive mirror covered in dust. But it wasn't an ordinary mirror. It reflected nothing. Just a dense black mist like liquid waiting to be stepped into. And beneath it, etched into the frame, where all memories return or are devoured. Malcolm looked at me. "I can't go with you," he said. I understood. And this time, I didn't look back. I stepped through the mirror. Everything vanished. I felt myself falling. No, drifting. Through thick, icy darkness, whispers filled the void around me. "You let her die. You broke your promise. You don't deserve another chance." I was drowning in it, until a hand grasped mine. Emily. She pulled me out of the abyss, and I heard her whisper, "This time, we'll escape." Story 5. The painting that drew my death. I've never been someone who appreciates art. Abstract paintings, those tangled, meaningless lines, they've always felt foreign to me. But that night, I found myself at the Weiler Gallery, on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon, as if some invisible force had drawn me there. The exhibition only opened at night, precisely from 7:16 p.m. to 2:16 a.m., and lasted for just 7 nights. They called it the Edge of the Mind, a surreal showcase for those brave enough to confront themselves. I went alone. When I arrived, the air was damp and cold, and the lingering scent of oil paint hung thick in the air, as if the building had never fully dried. Inside was a winding maze, dim, yellow lights casting a dusty glow on warped, deranged frames. Each room had a theme, marked only by Roman numerals, no map, no guide, and seemingly no clear way out. I entered room 4. There was no one else. Everything was silent, too silent. In a hidden corner of the room, near an old electrical cabinet with tangled wires like snake intestines, stood a painting far larger than the others. No title, no artist's nameplate, just a black curtain draped over it. As if it didn't belong, I pulled the curtain aside, and I saw myself. Not a vague resemblance. No, the person in the painting was me, down to the faint scar on my chin and the silver earring I'd worn since high school. But in the painting, I was hanging upside down from the ceiling, blood dripping onto a concrete floor. My eyes wide open and filled with terror. Something, undefined, shapeless, stood in the darkness behind me, savoring every moment of the torture. I stumbled back, slamming into the wall behind me, rattling the nearby frames. I took a deep breath and turned to leave. But when I glanced back, the painting had changed. Now I was being drowned in a bathtub, my hair soaked in water and blood, my eyes already cloudy. On my shoulder rested a slender hand with claws sharp as raven talons, holding me down. I couldn't breathe. Just watching was suffocating. I ran out of room 4. I tried to find the exit, but the exhibition felt reshaped. I walked through a hallway I was certain hadn't been there before, only to end up in another room. Room 8. Someone was there. A girl in a navy hoodie stood frozen before a painting. I stepped closer, intending to ask for directions. She turned to look at me, her eyes wide. "You saw that painting too?" she whispered. I nodded. "The dark corner? The painting without a name?" "Yes. Every time I go back, it shows a different way to die." A chill raced down my spine. "How many times have you seen it?" I asked. She didn't reply. Instead, she rolled up her sleeve. Her arm was covered in a lattice of scars, some fresh, some faded. "Every time I leave, I dream of those deaths, and they leave real marks." We decided to return to room 4 together. I didn't know why I wanted to go back. Maybe to prove I wasn't insane, or to find some kind of answer. When we pulled back the black curtain again, we both stopped breathing. This time, I was inside a crushed car, my body mangled under twisted metal. Flames licked up from under the seat, and my eyes remained open. In the cracked window reflected a figure. Her. The girl beside me, with vacant eyes and blood trickling down her temple. She stepped back, hands trembling. That can't be me. I've never... The painting changed again. Now she was hanging from the ceiling, her mouth sewn shut with wire. And me? I was standing behind her, holding the rope. We left the exhibition at 2:13 a.m., 3 minutes before closing time. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw myself in those deaths, reliving each terrifying moment, feeling every wound. The next morning, I received an email from an unknown address. No subject, no signature, just one sentence. Return on the second night, the next death awaits. And attached was an image, no, a painting, of me being burned alive on a pyre inside an empty gallery. Behind me, a shadowed figure was painting every stroke in blood. I didn't go to the exhibition on the second night. I stayed up all night, sitting alone in my armchair inside a 6th-floor apartment overlooking a quiet alley in Portland. Every time I blinked, I saw myself burning alive, flames rising in an empty gallery. The painting attached to the email couldn't be deleted. I tried erasing it, moving it, even shutting down the computer. But every time I turned it back on, it was there, vivid and haunting on the screen like a warning. What chilled me most was this. I could hear the painting breathing, not an actual breath, but a subtle rustling, like wind slipping through cracks in the wall. A sound that only existed when I looked at the painting. It didn't stop. It didn't change. It just waited. I didn't go, but she did. Her name was Naomi. I found her Facebook profile from the faded university logo on her hoodie that night. Naomi Kane, 24, an art student at PNCA, previously part of a group exhibit at Weiler. When I was about to message her, I saw her most recent post, timestamped 2:16 a.m. I saw it, and this time it looked back. Attached was a blurry photo. Naomi standing in the dark, lit by a red light behind her, the blood painting, where her body hung upside down like a broken puppet, and I was holding a brush, painting with her blood. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't bear the thought of appearing in those paintings again, as if I were a part of the deaths, not a victim, but a witness, a creator. By the third night, exactly 1:43 a.m., I returned to Weiler. The exhibition looked the same. Dim lights, winding corridors, no staff, no security. But something had changed. Room 4 was gone. I walked through 3 halls, 7 rooms, and circled back. There was no door marked with Roman numeral 4. Instead, there was an old wooden door. No number, no handle. Only a streak of dried blood trailing from the base across the tiled floor. I stood there for several minutes, listening. No sound. When I placed my hand on the door, it opened by itself. The room inside was freezing. Paintings covered every wall, each one depicting the same person. Me, dying in different ways. Hanging, buried alive, disemboweled, drowned, beheaded. But the horror didn't lie in the images. It was that every painting was moving, not like a video but subtle, pulsating motions in the eyes, the fingers, the lips of myself trapped in the canvases, like a version of me was stuck inside, silently struggling to escape. I stepped back, and when I turned around, room 4 had sealed shut. I don't know how long I wandered searching for a way out, but every corridor twisted, warped, like a living maze. I screamed, no answer. Then I heard footsteps, someone running. I rushed toward the sound and saw Naomi. She no longer wore her hoodie, but a blood-stained white dress. Her eyes wide open, mouth torn from cheek to cheek. But no sound came from her. She wasn't looking at me. She looked through me, then pointed behind me. I turned. The painting had followed me there. A large canvas, freestanding without a wall, right in the middle of the corridor. In the painting, me being strangled by Naomi. And the terrifying part, I felt it, my neck tightening. I collapsed, gasping for air, as Naomi stood motionless, blood trickling like tears from her hollow eyes. I fought back, clawing at the frame, and with all my strength, I ripped the canvas apart. Everything disappeared. I woke up in my armchair, drenched in sweat. The clock read 6:06 a.m. I didn't know if I had dreamed it, hallucinated it, or actually gone there. But my phone showed a missed call. From Naomi, I called back. No answer. I went to her address. The front door was ajar. No one inside. On the desk was a sketchbook. Naomi had drawn every image she saw at the exhibition. The final page showed me, standing in flames, with the painting behind me, breathing. Then I heard something. From the basement, I stepped down, and in the middle of that dark basement stood a new canvas, its paint still wet. On it, I saw Kissed My Tomorrow. Naomi's basement reeked of paint, ash, and something else. Sweet but damp, like burnt flesh mixed with old kerosene. My phone flashlight could only light a few steps ahead before its faint beam was swallowed by the thick darkness. I thought I was used to fear, or so I believed, until I saw the half-dried painting in the middle of the cement floor. I didn't need to get closer to know it was me. But this time, I wasn't dead. I was painting. A gaunt body hunched over an easel, blood-soaked brush in hand. Behind me was Naomi, hanging upside down, mouth agape, eyes bulging. And on the wall behind her, a blood-smeared message, "The one who sees first becomes the creator." I don't remember if I walked forward or collapsed in front of the painting. My vision swirled. I didn't know if I was looking at the painting or if it was looking back at me. A sound broke the silence, a rustling like something shifting beneath the floorboards. I jolted upright, sweeping my flashlight across the room. The basement walls were covered in frantic sketches, all of me and Naomi in grotesque death scenes beyond imagination. One drawing was nailed directly to the wall, scrawled beneath in shaky handwriting. They don't just depict, they summon. I fled the basement the moment footsteps began to echo above me. Naomi. I was certain she was dead, but there she stood in the kitchen, hair dripping, dress torn, like she'd crawled out from a grave, her face pale as wax, lips cracked dry. But the eyes, they were still Naomi's. She recognized me. "You've seen the final painting," she whispered, "and now it will happen." I growled, "What will happen? Naomi, are you alive?" She didn't answer. She simply turned, stepped out the back door, and vanished into the night, as if she had never been there. I ran after her, and just then, my phone vibrated. A new email, no subject, no sender. 3 deaths remaining. Attached was a photo, me, Naomi, and an unfamiliar man. All 3 seated around a wooden table, blood streaming from our eyes and ears. In the center of the table, a cluster of what looked like human eyes, arranged in a perfect circle, as if watching from every direction. I tried to escape the madness, left Portland, rented a car, and drove straight to Salem, where my old friend Henry was a professor of parapsychology at the local university. I told him everything, including the images I had saved. He sat in silence for nearly 20 minutes, eyes fixed on the screen. "Have you ever heard of the auto-memory manifestation theory?" he finally asked. I shook my head. It's an old hypothesis from the 17th century. Some painters back then believed if a person repeated images of their own death enough times, that death would manifest in reality, not passively, but as a compulsion. They would be driven to create it. A chill ran through me. You mean I'm going to kill myself the way the paintings show? Henry didn't answer directly. He typed something into his computer, then rummaged through a bookshelf and pulled out an old tome. Inside was a photo of a strange exhibition, held at the exact location where the Weiler Gallery now stood in 1962. A handwritten note beneath it read, "Only one survivor, the one who painted all the deaths." I returned to Portland Thursday night. I wasn't sure why, partly to understand what was happening, partly because the painting in my mind wouldn't stop screaming. An image of myself, clawing out my own eyes, blood pouring like a crimson waterfall, played over and over again. This time, the gallery was utterly silent. No people, no lights. The door was unlocked, but inside was as dark as a pit. I turned on my flashlight. Room 4 appeared once more, but what greeted me inside wasn't a painting. It was Naomi, sitting in the center of the room, painting. She turned to look at me, face ghost white. Around her were new, never-before-seen paintings, one of which was a depiction of this exact moment. Me entering the room, Naomi turning her head, and behind me, a shadow, holding up a paintbrush. I turned. No one was there. Naomi whispered, "It's your turn to paint." Story 6. The thing that sleeps beside me isn't my husband. My name is Emily Harper. I'm 27 years old, recently married to the man I love most in the world, Daniel. We moved into a small 2-story house in the suburbs of Oregon, a place that seemed, at first, almost too peaceful. The house had belonged to an elderly woman who passed away last year. They said she died in her sleep, in the very oak bed on the second floor that Daniel and I now sleep in. I'd never believed in superstition until I married Daniel. It all started about 2 weeks after the wedding. It was a cold November night. The snow hadn't fallen yet, but the air was dry and sharp. I woke up around 2:30 a.m., stirred by the feeling that someone was watching me. There was no sound, nothing clear, but the breathing, a heavy drawn-out breath, as if someone was struggling to hold something back. I felt it, right at the nape of my neck. Daniel? I thought. His arm was around my waist, cold enough to make me shiver. His fingers were dry and stiff, like stone. I shifted slightly and turned my head. It was Daniel. His face was half sunk in shadow, with only a sliver of moonlight through the curtain catching his cheekbone. He was staring at me, eyes slightly open. "Daniel?" I whispered. But he didn't answer. I can't explain why, but I couldn't move another inch. My body was frozen in place. All I could hear was the breathing of the thing lying next to me. Not Daniel. Something else. That sound wasn't human. And then, it blinked. A slow, deliberate blink, like it was learning how to do it. I bolted upright, drenched in sweat. The bedside lamp was still on. The curtains swayed slightly, but the bed was empty. There was no one beside me. Daniel wasn't there. I panicked and ran out of the room, my heart pounding like a war drum. Downstairs, the TV was still on, casting a faint light. Daniel was passed out on the couch, mouth slightly open, snoring. I shook him hard. What? What's going on? He mumbled, still half asleep. Did you come upstairs? I asked, my voice trembling. No, I was too tired, just crashed here. Why? What's wrong? I didn't know how to answer. I started tracking Daniel's sleep patterns. He always slept downstairs, every night. He said he wasn't used to the new bed yet, and that the bedroom was too cold, even with the heater on. But every night, I still woke up at exactly the same time, around 2:30 a.m., and someone was always in bed beside me. One night, I decided not to sleep. I lay on my side, faking slow, steady breaths, waiting. And right at 2:17 a.m., I heard the bedroom door open. Click, slow dragging footsteps echoed across the wooden floor. I didn't dare move. Every nerve in my body burned with the presence of something unseen, creeping closer. The mattress dipped beside me. Someone had just climbed into bed. I counted each breath, not mine, and not Daniel's. It was heavier, wetter, and smelled faintly metallic, like rust. A hand touched my waist. I couldn't take it anymore. I shot up and turned on the light. The bed was empty. No one was there. The blankets were smooth, untouched, but I saw it clearly. A dip in the mattress beside me, like someone had just left moments ago. I told Daniel everything the next morning. He was silent. Then he said something that froze me in place. Emily, I've dreamed about that too. I stared at him. Dreamed what? There's someone with my face, climbing into bed with you. I saw it in a dream, but when I woke up, I wasn't sure it was a dream anymore. Daniel gripped my hand. Emily, maybe we're just worn out from the wedding, moving, all the changes. But if you want, we can see a therapist. I agreed, though deep down, I didn't believe exhaustion had anything to do with it. That night, I locked the bedroom door. I pushed a chair against it. Still, at the same cursed hour, I woke again. 2:32 a.m., the chair scraped softly, then dragged aside. I froze. The door creaked open. A dark figure stood at the foot of the bed. Same height as Daniel, same posture. But the eyes, pure white. No pupils. And the mouth, torn open to the ears, like someone had tried to rip it apart with bare hands. I couldn't scream. My throat locked up. All I could do was watch as it climbed into bed, slowly. It lay down beside me, pulled the blanket up to its chest, then turned to me and smiled. The next morning, Daniel didn't find me in bed. He found me curled up in the closet, trembling, unable to speak. After that, I decided to install a camera in the bedroom. I needed to know exactly what was happening. I needed proof. And the next night, the camera captured something I will never forget. At 2:16 a.m., the door slowly opened. Someone, who looked just like Daniel, walked in. He stood there, staring at me as I slept for nearly 3 minutes, then silently climbed into bed. He didn't move, he didn't blink, and he never left. I watched that video at least 5 times the next morning. Each viewing sent a cold, nameless shiver up my spine. That person, that thing, walked into the room slowly, as if it knew every step, every corner of this house, every breath I had heard the night before, every glance I thought was a dream. It was all real. Daniel had no idea I had set up a camera in our room. I hadn't told him. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't know how to explain it without sounding insane. But I needed more proof. I secretly bought 2 more mini cameras, one for the upstairs hallway and one for the staircase. I needed to know where it was coming from. If it opened our bedroom door, it had to come from somewhere. 3 nights passed. Nothing changed. At 2:16 a.m., the door opened. No footsteps. Not a single sound from the figure, except breathing. I began to notice something. It didn't exactly look like Daniel. Not quite. Its gait was slower, its joints slightly misaligned, each movement accompanied by a dry cracking sound, and the face. At first, it looked exactly like Daniel. But I swear, by the 3rd night, every time it turned to look at me, it was changing. Hollowed cheeks, sunken eyes, lips darkened to a bluish hue, and on its neck, a bruise, like someone had choked it for a long, long time. I decided to show the video to Daniel. I couldn't carry this alone anymore. I needed him to believe me. He watched it and said nothing for nearly a full minute. "Emily, is this real? Last night and the night before that too?" Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "I've seen it before, in dreams, but now I don't think they were dreams." We brought the footage to one of Daniel's friends, Jake, who used to work in security and digital forensics. Jake watched the video frowning. "This isn't fake, but I've never seen anything like it. The figure appears in the bedroom, but none of the other motion sensors were triggered. Not in the hallway, not on the stairs." "That's impossible," I nearly shouted. "If it opened our door, it had to walk through the hall, right?" Jake nodded slowly, silent. Daniel asked, "Is there any way something could get in without actually walking?" Jake shrugged. "Only if it doesn't belong to this world." We moved downstairs to sleep for the next few nights, but the nightmare didn't stop. On the 2nd night, Daniel woke up in a panic. He was shaking, drenched in sweat, repeating the same sentence. "It touched me. It touched me." I asked who. He looked at me, but his eyes weren't Daniel's. "You should go back to bed," he said. "Daniel?" He smiled. A crooked, unnatural smile, like someone trying to imitate the act without ever learning how. I stepped back. My hands trembling, I grabbed the flashlight and aimed it at his face. Daniel was gone. I bolted upstairs and ran into the bedroom, and right then, I saw the real Daniel, curled up in bed, eyes wide open, clutching the blanket like his life depended on it. I screamed, threw my arms around him. I didn't care anymore. We both knew it was no longer just lying next to me. The next morning, I decided to learn more about this house. I went to the Elmridge Town Library, where they kept property records and archived news articles. An elderly librarian named Marlene quietly handed me the house file. The house had belonged to a man named Gerald Benson, who purchased it in 1952. Gerald lived here with his first wife, Clara, and later remarried a much younger nurse named Elise. The strange part, both wives died in exactly the same way. Lying in bed, eyes wide open, no signs of struggle. But their fingernails were torn, as if they had clawed at the bed sheets until their last breath. Gerald later vanished. No one ever found him. The house remained abandoned for nearly 40 years, until a woman named Joan bought it. The same woman we heard had died in our bedroom, also around 2 a.m. That night, while I was reviewing old documents, Daniel called me into the kitchen. He said he wanted to show me something. Near the kitchen, beneath the wooden floorboards, was a small old hatch, hidden under a carpet. We had never noticed it before. Daniel opened the hatch. A foul stench rose up, like it came from another world. A narrow, rotting staircase led down into the basement, but it wasn't a wine cellar, and it wasn't a storage room. It was a chamber. The walls were lined with black cloth. In the center stood an old wooden bed, and on it, a straw effigy with a wooden mask shaped exactly like Daniel's face. In the corner, photographs, photos of me, sleeping, and in the center of the room, written in something dried and crusted, "It only needs a name, a bed, and someone to replace." I stood frozen in the cold basement, the faint flashlight beam reflecting off the wooden, lifeless face resting atop a straw effigy. That face, every feature, every contour, was Daniel, not just a resemblance. It was Daniel, but as if someone had tried to reconstruct him from a warped memory. Like a portrait drawn by someone who had never truly known the person. Daniel stepped back, his hand trembling as it gripped my shoulder. "Emily, we have to get out of here." "No," I whispered. "Not until we know what's really happening." I approached the wall with a scrawled message. "It only needs a name, a bed, and someone to replace." Below the writing, I noticed a series of strange symbols, as if etched in with fingernails. Interlocking curves, overlapping spirals, forming a twisting pattern. The longer I stared, the more it felt like something was shifting inside my brain, as if someone else was listening too. We left the basement that very night. Daniel locked the door, hammered nails into it, even braced it with a metal bar. But I knew, whatever it was, it didn't need a door to enter. It never had. That night we checked into a hotel in downtown Elmridge. I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I stepped onto the balcony and lit a cigarette. Something I hadn't done since marrying Daniel. Guilt rose in my chest, but it couldn't overpower the fear. I pulled out my phone, opened the footage from our first night, then the second. And that's when I saw it. In every video, right at the moment the Daniel-shaped thing lay down in bed, a shadow flickered in the corner of the screen. I slowed it down. Under the dim light, the shadow didn't look human. It looked like smoke, but in the shape of a woman. A pale, faceless visage, long hair cascading down, standing silently by the bedroom door for exactly 2 seconds before vanishing. The next morning, I went to the town library to find Marlene, the oldest librarian in Elmridge. When I showed her the stills from the video, she stayed quiet for a long while. Then she asked, "Do you believe in doppelgangers?" I nodded. By then, I'd come to believe in many things I once dismissed. Marlene explained, "There's an old legend around here about a being called Roktul. They say it's a shadow born from souls who died unjustly in their sleep. It has no form of its own. It needs a face, a name, and a body to inhabit. And once it chooses a target, it returns night after night to lie beside the person it wishes to claim. Little by little, it copies their emotions, their memories, even their breath. And once it becomes identical." She paused. Her eyes seemed to look straight through me. "The real person never wakes up again." I returned to the hotel, pale as a ghost. Daniel was waiting for me in the lobby. "Something's wrong," he said. I had a dream last night, but I don't think it was a dream." "What did you see?" "I saw you sleeping on the bed in our old house, but you weren't alone. There was someone, also you, lying right behind you. Its hand was on your shoulder, and it whispered in your ear." Daniel gripped my hand tighter. It said, "This bed isn't yours." That night I called Sandy, the real estate agent, to ask about the house's previous owners. After a moment's hesitation, she admitted There were things not listed in the documents. The first owner, Gerald Benson, mysteriously disappeared. His wife died of sudden cardiac arrest. And Joan, the last resident, was reportedly seen by neighbors, talking to a man no one else ever saw. She called him Daniel, Sandy said quietly. That's your husband's name, isn't it? I felt the air drain from my lungs. She once said, Sandy continued, I don't want to sleep in there anymore. Every time I wake up, I don't know who's the real one. I returned to the house one final time. Daniel protested, but I told him, if I didn't uncover the truth, we'd never escape this shadow. I went into the bedroom and set up a 360-degree camera. Then I brought the effigy from the basement and placed it exactly where I normally slept. Waited to lure it into revealing itself. And I waited. 2:16 a.m. No door creaked, no footsteps echoed, but the temperature dropped sharply. I could see my breath in the air. The blanket beside me began to sink. Slowly, very slowly, no one was there. But something was lying next to me. I bit my lip, refusing to turn. But in my heart, I knew. It was looking at me. Then a whisper echoed in my mind. Not through my ears, but deep in my bones. Your name is mine now. Story 7. They say I'm pregnant, but what's inside isn't human. I was 33 when I got pregnant with my first child, living with my husband in a quiet town in Oregon, where the streets were blanketed with crimson maple leaves and autumn stretched on like a scene from an old film. Everything seemed perfect. Our small 2-story house at the end of a cul-de-sac, the chirping of sparrows each morning, and the kind neighbors who always smiled as we took evening walks. Ryan, my husband, and I had longed for this child. 3 years of infertility treatment, 2 miscarriages, and countless silent nights hoping for a miracle. And then, one early winter morning, that miracle appeared in the form of 2 red lines on a pregnancy test. I remember our first ultrasound at Green Valley Clinic vividly. Dr. Richards, an elderly man with a deep, soothing voice, gently placed the probe on my belly. Brian gripped my hand tightly as the grainy black and white screen began revealing the faint outline of a tiny life. It was a sacred moment. But then, I saw it. It wasn't the developing baby that caught my eye. It was something else. Faintly behind the shadow of the fetus was a face, not a baby's face. Long, distorted, eyes sunken as if hollowed out, a mouth stretched to the ears with jagged teeth, and skin wrinkled like rotting flesh. And I swear, it was smiling. She's growing strong, Dr. Richards said, unaware of anything wrong. Ryan smiled too, gazing at the printed image the nurse had handed him. She looks just like you, he said. But I couldn't say a word. From that moment, the dreams began. The first nightmare came the next night. I stood in a stark white room, bare ceiling, windowless walls. On a birthing table, I was pushing, but no doctors or nurses were around. Ryan stood silently in a corner, his back turned. I felt the tearing pain. Then came a shrill, piercing cry. I looked down at the baby. It had no eyes, just 2 black gaping holes so deep I could hear something hissing from within them. Its mouth opened, and it spoke. You're not my mother. You're not my mother. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, clutching my belly. Ryan bolted upright, panicked, but I couldn't tell him. How could I explain that? I didn't believe the child inside me was mine. The nightmares returned, night after night. Sometimes I gave birth to a faceless creature. Sometimes it crawled out of me like an animal. Once, I woke to find blood soaking the bed sheets. But minutes later, it was gone, as if it had never happened. I began avoiding the ultrasound images, even hiding them away. But one day, while cleaning, I found an old print mixed in with the medicine cabinet. And I swear to God, the face was clearer than before. No longer blurry. It was closer to the fetus. Then the strange things started happening during the day. One morning, while washing my face in the bathroom, I heard someone call my name. Emily. But Ryan had already left for work. I looked into the mirror, and in a brief flickering moment, I saw another face, right behind my shoulder. The same face from the ultrasound. I spun around. No one was there. But the smell of damp soil and decaying flesh lingered on me, as if it clung to my skin. I started investigating. I returned to Green Valley Clinic and demanded to see the original ultrasound file. At first, Dr. Richards refused, insisting nothing was wrong. But after I begged, nearly in tears, he agreed. I sat alone in the diagnostic room, staring at the screen. Frame by frame, I searched, and at one specific moment, I saw it clearly, not just a face, a form, something humanoid, pressed against the inside of my womb, clinging to the uterine wall like it was feeding off the fetus. I gagged and vomited into the trash bin beside me. When I looked back, the footage was gone from the screen. I glanced up. The door had swung open, but no one stood there. That night, Ryan found me in the nursery. I didn't remember walking there. He said when he entered the room, I was murmuring to myself, clutching the ultrasound photo, eyes wide open, and grinning like a madwoman. I didn't believe him, until he showed me the security footage he'd secretly installed out of concern. The video made me stop breathing. In the clip, I stood at the crib, whispering, "Don't worry. Mommy won't let them take you away. You're mine." Then picked up a pair of scissors and slashed my belly. But there was no wound, only a red imprint, as if something had held me from inside. I can no longer tell what's real and what's not. But one thing I know for certain, if this child is ever born, it won't be mine. It's something else. Something that has waited far too long to cross into this world. Through me, and I'm afraid it's no longer just a threat in my dreams. I don't remember the last time I truly slept. The nightmares cling to me like a second skin, tight, suffocating, impossible to peel away. Every time I close my eyes, I see that face, the face of the nameless thing growing inside me. It no longer just stands in the dark. Now it steps out, comes closer, and whispers things I never dare repeat. I started avoiding mirrors. Since I got pregnant, my face has changed somewhat, which is normal. But this wasn't the glow people talk about, the radiant mother or joy in her eyes. No. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw my eyelids sunken like I hadn't slept in weeks. My skin the color of ashes. But worse than that, the reflection's expression didn't fully match mine. One morning, I tilted my head slightly to look into the bathroom mirror, and I saw myself, smirking. I wasn't smiling. I stared at the reflection, and for a few seconds, I saw it wink at me. Just one eye. The same sunken eye I'd seen in my dreams. Like a pit of darkness, I shattered the mirror. The shards clattered into the sink. Some sliced my hand. Blood poured like a stream. but I felt no pain, only the creeping sense that I was being watched, not just from within the mirror, but from inside my own body. Ryan started to notice something was wrong. He tried to pretend things were okay. Every morning, he made coffee, kissed me softly on the cheek before leaving for work, but I could see it in his eyes. Fear. Once, I caught him searching on his laptop. Prenatal psychosis. Identity disorder after miscarriage. Delusional pregnancy syndrome. He thought I was sick. But how could I explain that what I was experiencing wasn't an illness, but an intrusion? I tried seeing a therapist, Dr. Malley, a woman in her 40s, round glasses, calm voice, welcomed me into a room filled with soft light. I told her about the dreams, about the face in the ultrasound, about the mirror, and the video Ryan recorded. She listened closely, then said I might be experiencing identity dissociation syndrome, triggered by unresolved trauma from prior miscarriages. She prescribed mild sedatives, told me to rest more, think less, and try evening meditation. I asked, what if I said there really is someone else? Inside me? Not my imagination. Real. She paused, then asked, what's its name? I froze. I had never thought of that. But then, like it rose from some hidden trench in my mind, a name slipped from my lips without thought. Luma. I didn't know where I'd heard it, but as soon as I spoke it aloud, the room grew colder. A ceiling light flickered. Even Dr. Malley shivered, then forced a smile and scribbled something down. Since that day, Luma started calling me by name. Every night in dreams, I was no longer just birthing her. I was raising her, dressing her. This eyeless creature with sun-dried skin and a mouth that never stopped speaking. She called me mother. But each time she said the word, I felt as if someone were peeling the skin off my body. I want to go home, she whispered. I don't want to live in here anymore. I couldn't take it. I returned to Green Valley Clinic, this time without an appointment. Dr. Richards looked annoyed to see me, but after pleading, he reluctantly agreed to another ultrasound. I lay on the table. The machine hummed, and the image appeared on the screen. The fetus was still there, curled up as if asleep. But in one corner, I saw that face, and this time, it wasn't faint. It was looking straight at me, and it winked. I screamed, flinched off the table, knocking over the equipment. Dr. Richards shouted, furious, but I was already sprinting from the room like I was fleeing hell itself. I didn't look back, afraid that if I did, I'd never be me again. That night, I decided to leave. I packed a few things, told Ryan I was going to stay with my mother in Portland for a few days. The truth is, my mother had been dead for over 10 years, but I needed to get out of that house, where every room felt like someone was standing in the shadows, silently watching. I rented a small wooden cabin on the edge of the Clatsop forest, a place I had camped as a child. I needed space, a place without mirrors, without cameras, without anyone asking, "Are you okay?" Just enough silence to unravel safely in my madness. But on the first night at the cabin, when I opened my suitcase, I found the ultrasound photo neatly tucked between my clothes. I swear I didn't pack it. I wanted to throw it in the fire, but for some reason I couldn't. In the photo, there was no fetus anymore, only a face. Luma. She was smiling. My smile, but stretched grotesquely wide, reaching both cheeks. And below the image, written in red ink, "It's time to open the door." I didn't know which door, but in that moment, I heard it. A soft scratching beneath the floorboards of the cabin. Something, or someone, crawling beneath the wooden planks as if it had finally found me. And I knew I couldn't run anymore. The cabin had no basement. I was sure of that. I had personally selected it through the website. But that night, the faint clicking beneath the floor made me question everything. Not just about this wooden house, but about the very line between what's real and what I thought I could control. I stood frozen in the dark, gripping the flashlight tightly, my stomach tightening in waves, as if the child inside me was afraid too. But strangely, the longer I stood there, the more I felt it wasn't afraid. It was excited. The noise beneath the floor stopped. Then, a creak, like rusted hinges being forced open after years of silence. I stepped slowly toward the center of the room, bent down, and knocked lightly on the wooden floor. A hollow sound echoed back. I pulled back the old rug. There, a small iron hinge, a trapdoor. I had never seen it before. It wasn't on the layout, and it wasn't mentioned in the listing. But somehow, I knew it had always been there. I didn't open it. Instead, I tried locking the cabin up tight, turned on every light, crawled back into bed, and held my stomach, praying I was just imagining things. Then the lights began to flicker, and from beneath the floor, a voice rose. Not loud, not clear, but undeniably real. "Mommy, it's cold. Can you open the door for me?" I couldn't stay calm anymore. I bolted out of the cabin, clutching my flashlight and phone. The night sky above the Clatsop forest was pitch black, like a velvet cloth draped over the world. I kept running and running until the light from the cabin became nothing more than a faint, distant flicker. I called Ryan. He answered on the third ring. My voice cracked as I gasped for breath. "Ryan, I don't think this thing is really our baby." He was silent for a moment, then replied, his voice raspy. "Emily, I know." I froze. Before I could ask, he continued. I saw someone. An old woman in Salem. She's not a doctor. But she looked at the ultrasound and said, "It doesn't belong to this world." My grip on the phone tightened. My heart thundered in my chest. What else did she say? She said if the child is born, it will take the mother's soul. And if it's denied, it will find a way back, through dreams, through mirrors, or through an open door. I collapsed onto the forest floor, my hands trembling. The ultrasound photo I always kept with me suddenly felt warm in my pocket. I pulled it out, and for the first time, not through a screen, not in a dream, I saw the face move. Its eyes blinked, its lips twitched, and a whisper came, not from its mouth, but from the image itself. "Don't let them take me, Mommy. I'm here because you called me." I returned to the cabin before dawn. The ground was shrouded in mist, like the forest was hiding something beneath a white veil. The cabin door stood open. I knew I had locked it. On the table was a notebook, old, bound in cracked leather, and my name subtly engraved on the cover. Emily D. Hayes. I had never seen this notebook before. The first page held a single, water-smudged line in shaky black ink. The contract is signed. They only needed a door, and a mother willing to face what she lost. I flipped through. It wasn't a diary, it was a record. Dozens, hundreds of names, birth dates, death dates, and strange symbols next to each. Some had died right after birth. Some were marked as missing. Some read, "Pregnant but never delivered." I turned to the last page. My name was there. Emily D. Hayes, signed at 2:16 a.m., February 3rd. Status: undergoing integration. Luma process 87%. I stumbled back. 2:16 a.m. I had never signed anything at that time. But then I remembered, one night not long ago, I woke up to find ink on my hand. I thought it was from a broken pen. But now, I wasn't so sure. I knelt down and touched the trapdoor handle. Right then, laughter echoed from beneath the earth. Not a child's giggle, but something ancient. Something that knew who I was. Something that knew what I had sacrificed to have this child. I collapsed to the floor whispering, "I don't want this. I didn't call it. I just wanted to be a mother." But the voice from below replied, "Nothing comes without a price, Emily. You chose." The trapdoor sprang open, on its own, and I saw it. Not stairs, not a basement, a hospital room, sterile white, completely empty, a delivery table, and me, lying on it, eyes wide open, blood soaking the sheets. Standing beside me was Luma, grotesque, towering, reeking of decay, and its face was mine, my mirror self, and it was smiling. I slammed the trapdoor shut. No hesitation. I didn't need to see another image. I didn't need a clearer look at that deformed body or to hear another whisper slithering through the cracks. I only knew one thing. I had to get out. Now, before it stepped out of that delivery room and became me. The cabin seemed to shrink around me. The air thickened, like fog soaking into every grain of wood. Each step I took, the floor moaned, not just the usual creaks of old timber. It was as if someone was walking with me, half a beat behind, dragging feet across the boards. I grabbed my suitcase, the car keys, but the moment I stepped outside, I froze. My car was gone, no trace, no tires, not even a tread mark on the damp ground, as if it had never existed. I tried calling Ryan, no signal. I checked the map app, no location shown. Every application just displayed loading and never moved past it. Only one new notification appeared, sent automatically from Google Photos, titled "Delivered at 2:16 a.m." My hands trembling, I opened it. It was a photo taken from a ceiling corner in a sterile white delivery room, identical to the one I'd seen beneath the trapdoor. On the table lay me, motionless, but this time, it wasn't just Luma standing beside me. It was Ryan. He stood still, dressed in surgical scrubs, blood-stained gloves, staring intently at the creature being held by the nurse. Or rather, something posing as a nurse. It had no face, rubbery skin stretched too tight, and its neck bent at an unnatural angle. I screamed. No answer. The wind howled through the trees in waves, shrill like the cry of a newborn. But the sound wasn't human. I bolted back into the cabin, locking every door. I shattered every mirror. I turned off all the lights, curled up in a corner of the room, suitcase flung open beside me. The ultrasound photo slipped out, and now there was something new. A tiny hand was gripping the edge of the womb. 5 fingers, but with claws. A cramp seized my abdomen. A sharp pain shot up from below my belly, wrapping around to my spine, like I was being pulled tight with barbed wire. No, it couldn't be. I was only 7 months along. It was too soon to go into labor, too soon to... Mommy, it's time. The voice came from right behind my neck, as if someone was sitting against my back, whispering into my ear. I jumped up and spun around. No one. But the chandelier above began to rattle. The floor was wet. Amniotic fluid. I don't remember how long I screamed or lay unconscious. Only that when I opened my eyes, I was on the cold wooden floor, my head against the table leg, and the trapdoor's red light was flickering open. Below was no longer delivery room. It was Forest Hollow Hospital, the one where I'd been treated for infertility 3 years ago. But everything was upside down. The ceiling was now the floor. The entrance hung midair. Hallways slanted, fluorescent lights flickered erratically, and on every wall were rows of ultrasound images. All faces like lumas, but at different ages, with different expressions. Some smiled, some cried, some screamed silently. I stumbled downward, drawn by an invisible thread. At the end of the hall was a patient room, number 216. I couldn't stop myself from pushing it open. Inside was a crib, and in the crib lay a baby, pale skin, no eyes, but it was breathing. I backed away, trembling head to toe, but it reached out its hand. The voice returned. "Give me a name, and I'll leave you alone." I collapsed to my knees. The fortune teller in Salem echoed in my mind. If the child is named, it will truly exist. I shook my head, mouth dry as ash. "No, you're not my child. I didn't call you here." And the baby opened its mouth. It stretched impossibly wide, all the way to its ears, revealing a dark, endless void. From within, voices spilled out. My voice, Ryan's, my mother's, Dr. Richard's, and many more women I didn't recognize. They all said that once, but they all gave me a name in the end. I screamed, hands clamped over my ears, but it didn't matter. The sound slithered through my bones like wind threading through marrow. And then, a different sound, an alarm, like someone had triggered an emergency system. I looked up and saw Ryan. He stepped into the room. No blood, no scrubs. Just him. Eyes damp, lips pressed tight. "I'm sorry, I didn't know it would be like this," I sobbed. "We have to end it now." He nodded, walked up to the crib. The baby didn't cry, didn't move. It only watched, or rather sensed, his every step with a perception not of this world. Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small knife. It was summoned by sacrifice. "I was wrong, Emily, but we still have one choice left." I didn't understand, but then he sliced his palm open, letting blood drip into the baby's mouth. It smiled, a horrific grin, and then it vanished, like ash being sucked back into the air. The room collapsed. The walls spiraled inward as if pulled into a void. Ryan and I clung to each other in the eye of the storm until everything went black. I woke up in a real hospital. Warm light, steady beeping from a monitor. Ryan sat beside me. My belly was flat. I asked through tears, "Is it gone?" He shook his head. Didn't speak, but I understood. The doctor said I miscarried due to prolonged unconsciousness and cold exposure. They found nothing abnormal. No one had seen anything from the cabin. No deformed ultrasound photos. No patient file under Emily Hayes in the Forest Hollow system. But when I returned home, I found the journal. It was still there, placed on the baby's crib. And the last page had been updated. Emily D. Hayes, status incomplete. Luma, awaiting next cycle. Story 8, my name on a tombstone. But I'm still alive. I never believed in superstition. As a forensic assistant intern at the Elmridge County Morgue, I've seen every kind of body pulled in from suicides, accidents, even murders. But never, not once, had I felt the presence of what people called wandering souls. To me, It was always just rotting flesh and decomposing tissue. Until that day. It was a Friday, as gloomy as any other October day, except I left my shift earlier than usual. There was a tightness in my chest, like someone had whispered something into my ear while I was cleaning the stainless steel table where we had placed an unidentified corpse. A man in his 40s, no ID, no one claimed the body. His face had been smashed in, but I swear. When I glanced over, one of his eyes was still open. I needed air. I needed to get out. Instead of heading home, I drove aimlessly. And somehow, I ended up parked in front of Maple Hill Cemetery, an abandoned graveyard on the outskirts of town. The rusty gate was ajar. A weathered wooden sign swung gently. Maple Hill, 1889. I don't know why I walked in. I just remember my feet moving on their own, as if pulled forward by invisible strings. Old crumbling headstones leaned into roots, many eroded beyond legibility. Only faint traces of time carved into stone. Dry leaves blanketed the ground. The air was thick with damp earth and the silence of the dead. I walked past rows of graves, gently moving aside branches in my path. A quiet heaviness sinking into my chest. There's something unsettling about reading the names of the dead. Those who once lived, breathed, and are now reduced to engravings on stone. Then I stopped. I saw a headstone that was completely new. That didn't make sense. All the others were covered in moss or cracked with age, but this one? It looked freshly carved. The surface smooth, the engravings deep, and a faint scent of recently burned incense still lingered. And then I saw the name engraved on it, Allison M. Gray. My heart seized. I leaned closer. Born 1994. Date of death. Today, April 3rd, 2025. I stumbled back a step. Eyes locked on the headstone like it was mocking me. The full name, the birth year, an exact match. I grabbed my phone, pulled up the ID card from my wallet, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. It was me, Allison Marie Gray, my birth date. And today was... I turned to run, but my legs wouldn't move. A sudden gust of wind howled through the trees like muffled screams choking on air. The sky darkened in minutes, thick clouds swirling in. The air dropped cold. I turned back. My name on the stone was no longer gray. It was red, not paint, blood. Fresh, bright blood seeping from the engraved letters, dripping down the stone like tears from the afterlife. Beneath my name, a new line had appeared, as if carved by a knife. Thank you for coming willingly. Footsteps behind me froze my spine. Not the wind, not crunching leaves. Footsteps. Human. Heavy, pressing into the root-covered soil. I swallowed hard, slowly turning. No one. But when I looked down, I saw them. Clear footprints in the mud, wet and deep, leading out from the woods straight to where I stood. A coarse, rasping laugh echoed nearby. I turned in panic, bolting toward where I thought I'd parked the car. But it was gone. My car had vanished. Where it had been was now just empty earth. No tire tracks, no skid marks, not even a single print. I ran, kept running in what I believed was the way out. But the further I ran, the deeper into the cemetery I seemed to fall. Headstones crowded closer like hundreds of stone eyes watching me. Some tilted oddly, like the soil beneath had recently been disturbed. Then I saw a figure up ahead. "Wait, please help me," I screamed. They didn't turn. I ran harder, trying to catch up. And when I got close enough, It was me, another version of me, wearing the same clothes I had on that morning. A white lab coat stained with dried blood, gloves still on. She was standing in front of another grave, and on that headstone was my mother's name. She turned, looked straight at me and smiled. A crooked, grotesque grin. Her eyes were pitch black. I screamed and woke up inside my car, parked on the roadside near Maple Hill. It was daylight. 6:47 a.m. I shot upright, soaked in sweat, hands trembling. A dream? Was it all a dream? But then I looked down and saw something had fallen from the pocket of my lab coat. A small shard of stone, carved with the letter G. The faint scent of incense still clung to it. I never went back to Maple Hill. But ever since that day, every morning I wake up to a white lily placed at my doorstep. No one sees who delivers it. No camera ever catches it. And this morning, I received an invitation to attend my own funeral. I had tried to forget everything. I told myself it was nothing more than a nightmare, spawned from stress and exhaustion. The images at Maple Hill Cemetery, the headstone with my name, the bloody writing, the woman who looked exactly like me, must have been the product of a mind desperate for rest. But the funeral card was real. I still remember standing frozen in the doorway of my apartment, eyes locked on the pristine white envelope resting neatly on the doormat. No stamp, no return address. The careful handwriting on the front. Allison Marie Gray, the deceased. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a simple black funeral card with silver trim. Bold text in the center. The memorial service for Allison M. Gray will be held at Whitmore Funeral Home, 10 a.m. today. Today, I checked the time. 9:32 a.m. I should have thrown it away. I should have stayed home, called someone, anyone. But instead, I put on my coat, got in the car, and drove straight to Whitmore Funeral Home. A place I had visited only once before, 3 years ago, during a student internship at the scene of a fatal crash. I didn't know why I was doing it. It felt like something was pulling me forward. Or maybe I just needed to know how thin the line between reality and delusion had truly become. Whitmore was an old stone building tucked behind a cluster of cypress trees, towering like silent sentinels guarding the dead. The sky was gray, the air heavy and unmoving as I stepped into the foyer. No one at the front desk, no footsteps, no soft funeral music. Only a single door, slightly ajar, at the end of the hallway, leading to the memorial room. I approached it slowly, took a deep breath, and pushed it open. The room was empty, black curtains drawn over the windows. In the center, a dark wooden casket, the lid cracked open, its glossy surface reflecting the dim light. I didn't want to get closer, but I couldn't stop myself. My heart thundered in my chest. My palms were ice. As I stepped forward and looked inside, I saw myself lying there, eyes closed, hands folded over my chest, skin pale as wax. No, this couldn't be. I reached up and touched my own face, still breathing, but the body in the coffin wasn't. It was my corpse. Suddenly, the door behind me slammed shut. I spun around, heart in my throat. A shadow passed outside in the hallway. I rushed out. "Hello? Who's there?" I yelled. No answer. I ran down the corridor, opening doors, calling out, but every room was empty. And then, at the end of the last hallway, I saw him. An old man in a black suit, silver hair, standing with his back to me. Sir, I don't know what's going on. Someone... I stammered. He turned slowly. His face was familiar. It was the unidentified corpse I had examined just days before. The man with the mangled face and the single intact eye. But now, his face was whole, the skin pink and unblemished. Yet the eyes were the same, empty, endless, pulling my soul into their depth. "You came," he said, his voice deep, like it echoed from the bottom of the earth. I don't understand. You saw the stone because you are next. And the next always has to come, willingly. I stumbled back. My head spun. Why? Why me? Because you touched what you shouldn't, saw what you weren't meant to. Do you remember the last pair of eyes you looked into in the morgue? I shivered. Who are you? The man tilted his head, a chilling smile spreading across his face. I was the one before you. And now, I am the gatekeeper. As he spoke those final words, the hallway lights began to shut off, one by one, from far to near. I turned and ran, tripping over the carpet. When I looked up, I was no longer in the funeral home. I was back in Maple Hill Cemetery, surrounded by rows of weathered headstones. The wind howled. The trees swayed violently. One of the gravestones cracked. A hand reached out from the soil. I screamed. Another hand, then another. The dead were rising, not like zombies from the movies, but pale, faceless hollows, stripped of skin, stumbling forward, joints cracking with every movement. I ran, desperate to escape. Then I saw her. A little girl standing alone on the path, long black hair, a filthy white dress. She didn't turn her head. She only spoke one sentence. If you leave before you're ready, those behind you will never rest. I froze. Who's behind me? The girl looked up. It was my mother's face, and behind her, dozens of people I had worked with at the morgue. Bodies I had examined, dissected, touched. They stood silently, eyes hollow, and all of them were looking at me. I woke again, in my bed, in my room, soaked in sweat, the window wide open. Still night. 2:48 a.m. I rushed to the door. No lilies, no new card. It must have been a dream. But in my hand was the funeral invitation from earlier that day, now scorched to the edges, smelling of ash. I looked up at the mirror and saw a bruise shaped like fingernails on my neck. I hadn't slept for 3 nights since receiving the funeral card. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw myself standing in Maple Hill Cemetery, surrounded by hundreds of gravestones, each one slowly turning to face me with every step I took. The girl with my mother's face still stood there, her eyes hollow, her voice echoing endlessly in my mind. Those left behind will never rest. I didn't know if I was haunted by hallucinations or if something beyond human understanding had latched onto me. But I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to start. The nameless man, the first corpse in this string of strange events. He had no ID, his face smashed beyond recognition. But he had spoken to me, clearly, sharply, with eyes that sliced through mine, as if he had never died. I decided to return to the morgue's archive room during the night shift when no one would be around. I needed to see his records, the autopsy report, the post-mortem photos, anything that could reveal who he was. The records room was in the basement, no windows. That usual mixture of mildew and embalming chemicals always made my skin crawl, but this time, something felt different. Colder, quieter, as if the room itself was hiding something. I searched for the file labeled John Doe and 3095. the tag assigned to the unidentified body. But strangely, it had been wiped from the system. No documents, no photos, no trace. It was as if he had never existed. Panic surged. I turned to the printed backup files. In the death records for the previous week, I found a yellow folder, unmarked. When I opened it, my heart jumped into my throat. Inside was a forensic sketch from facial recognition software. And the face was my father's. Impossible. My father died when I was 13, in a car crash. His body had been burned beyond recognition. I never saw him one last time. But the face in the drawing, the sharp ridge of the nose, the wrinkle near his left eye, the faint scar under the chin. It was him. There was no mistaking it. I sank to the floor, hands trembling. Everything was spiraling out of control. The dead don't come back. And yet my father had appeared in the funeral home, spoken to me, warned me, and called himself the gatekeeper. I had to know how he really died. The next morning, I drove to the Elm Ridge police station where old death records were archived. Posing as a forensic assistant, I gained access to the accident reports from years ago. While flipping through the 2007 files, my father's year, I came across a photo from the crash scene. The car was completely burnt, but what made my blood freeze was that there were two bodies in the front seat, both still intact. One was my father. The other was me, 13 years old, but I wasn't in that car. My mother had confirmed I was at school with multiple witnesses. So why did the photo show a girl in an Elm Ridge elementary uniform? Exactly the uniform from that year. I zoomed in. The girl's head was bowed, her long hair hiding her face, but around her neck was a heart-shaped necklace, engraved with an A. I still kept that necklace in my keepsake box. A chill shot down my spine. If I really died with my father in that crash, then who had been living my life ever since? Me or a replacement? Back home, I searched beneath my bed for a small wooden box, the one where I kept childhood mementos. I opened it, and the necklace was gone. In its place, a folded piece of old silver paper, untouched for years. My hands shook as I opened it. Faded blue ink scrawled across it. You passed the first time, but the gatekeeper never forgets. It's time. Just then, the landline rang. Who even used landlines anymore? I picked up. A child's voice came through. Light, but rough. Do you remember me? I froze. Who is this? I'm the one you left behind in the car that day. I was cold, but I'm not cold anymore. I just wanted you to know. When the gatekeeper opens the door, not everyone gets to cross. A giggle, then silence. I couldn't breathe. My heart slammed in my chest. My eyes turned to the window. Outside, snow had started to fall. Winter wasn't here yet, but the world was white. And on the frosted window pane, a child's handprint had appeared. I fled the house, drove like a madwoman straight to Maple Hill. If I had died, if some door had opened to let me through, then I needed to know what was sacrificed and why the gravestone thanked me for coming willingly. My memories of the day my father died have always been hazy. I remember the phone ringing in the middle of the night, my mother screaming. I remember a pink pajama set stained with blood from an unknown source. And most vividly of all, I remember a recurring dream I had for years. I was sitting in a burning car beside my father, and he was shouting, "Run, Ali, run!" But I couldn't move. I used to think it was trauma, until I saw the photo of the crash scene. A little girl in a school uniform sat motionless in the car. And that girl was me. So maybe the dream wasn't just a dream. I needed answers. And no one could give them to me better than my mother. She lived alone in a small wooden house on the southern edge of town. The same house the three of us lived in before the accident. Ever since I moved out, she'd barely touched anything old, as if memories were something sacred, untouchable. I arrived at noon. Snow was still falling, eerily quiet, unseasonal, but I no longer believed in seasons. My mother opened the door, her face tightening at the sight of me. Allison? Good Lord, what are you doing here at this hour? I didn't beat around the bush. Mom, just tell me the truth. Was I really in the car with Dad that day? She froze, then looked away, stepping back into the house. I told you before, you weren't there, Allison. But there's a girl in the scene photo. She looks exactly like me. And Dad was the one who showed up at the funeral home last week. He's still alive, or something wearing him still exists. I saw the gatekeeper. I spoke in a torrent, not caring if I sounded insane. My mother stood still for a long time. Then she exhaled, her voice trembling. I should have burned it all a long time ago. She walked to an old wooden cabinet, took out a locked metal box. After fumbling with the lock, she retrieved a bundle of old papers and a small diary. After the crash, they said only your father's body was found. But strangely, there was a second body too, burned beyond recognition, size matching that of a 13-year-old girl. But you were right beside me, alive, not a single scratch. She looked up at me, her eyes full of torment. I accepted it, but I never asked why. I opened the diary. My father's handwriting filled the pages. The last entry was dated April 3rd, 2007. The final page was a short passage, scrawled in panic. I hear the call every night. The door in my dream is opening. They say I must bring a soul to pass through, a substitute, or I won't be allowed to continue. But how can I bring my daughter? But if I don't, maybe another will come instead. I froze. The final sentence had been violently scratched out, nearly tearing through the page. It's not her, but it looks just like her. I left in a daze. If what my father wrote was real, then it meant he had seen something. A door, a world beyond, where life and death weren't clearly divided. And he had been asked to bring a soul as a sacrifice, but he refused. And in the end, another version of me appeared in his place. I don't know what happened. In the moment, the fire engulfed the car. But afterward, there was an Allison who lived, and an Allison who remained. So who am I? That night I returned to Maple Hill, alone. I brought with me my father's journal, the crash site photo, and the partially burnt funeral card. I stood before the gravestone bearing my name, now covered in snow. I bent down, about to place my hand on it, when a whisper sounded behind me. If you touch it, you'll remember everything. I turned. It was the man from before, the one who called himself the gatekeeper. But now his eyes were no longer cold. They were filled with sorrow and regret. I was your father's friend, the first to see the door. We walked through it together because we wanted to know what lies beyond death. But we broke a sacred rule. What rule? That the dead must go willingly. And we started trading souls, sending others through as substitutes to buy ourselves more time. I was speechless. Your father couldn't do that to you, so he chose to stay But when he went, the door remained open. And you stepped through. But you don't remember. Because you weren't the first, Allison. My legs gave way. Then, what am I? The man shook his head gently. Aversion released from the door. But now, you've touched the stone. You've remembered. And the price for returning must always be paid. The wind howled violently. Snow fell like a storm. I screamed. I don't want to live on someone else's soul. I don't want to exist if it's a curse. The man gave a mournful smile. None of us do, but once you've lived, who dares choose death again?